The Honorable, the Speaker.
Almighty God, we give thanks to you, the creator of the universe, and humbly beseech you to direct and prosper the deliberations of the members of this house here assembled for the advancement of your glory and the trust and welfare of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Grant that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be established among us for all generations. Amen. Amen. Namaste.
Public business, government business, bills, second reading.
Honorable members, I shall now propose the question for debate. The question is that a bill entitled an act to provide for the service of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year ending on the 30th day of September 2018 be now read a second time. Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I rise today to contribute to the fiscal 2018 national budget debate, and I do so with much dismay and concern for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Before I get into the substance of the response, allow me to take a moment to thank the members of my team who held consultations with their constituents ahead of the presentation of the budget on Monday, and in so doing to get the views of their constituents about the concerns and the direction of the current government. I also want to thank the many professionals and concerned citizens who took the time to send me their observations, analysis, and critique of the 2018 budget. I welcome the input of the people of our country, many of whom are quite distressed over what they're seeing taking place. My philosophy, Madam Speaker, has always been to listen and then lead, and I value the feedback that has been provided thus far. I also want to thank the members of my hard-working staff and others who have assisted in the preparation of my response. The contribution I make today is grounded in my firm belief that service to our country and its people, whether that be in government or in opposition, is not only the most significant mandate of elected representatives of this House, it is also a privilege and a sacred duty. And so, as members of this honorable House, we have a very special obligation at every single step of the way, no matter how high the cabinet office we may or may not hold. We must always remember the people who put us here, whose votes we went campaigning for and making promises in order to get into this chamber. We must never forget the fact that they are our employers to whom we must answer and account to at all times. So, as I thank all citizens who shared with me their thoughts, I want to assure them that as a parliamentarian here today, I am here to represent those people in my contribution to this debate. A World Economic Forum article just in this very year, 2017, September, reminds me of the reasons I entered into public service, and that is to do my part to try to improve the quality of the lives of the people of our country. That article notes that governments are charged with three core duties, three core responsibilities, and that is to be protector, to be provider, and to be an investor in people. In my contribution today, I intend to show how this government has failed in all three core duties to citizens, and how they will continue to fail in these three core duties. I will also demonstrate how the minister attempted to distort and fudge some of the numbers presented, and in fact uttered some blatant untruths in his presentation. I do not intend to deal with every issue or sector, as I have very competent and capable colleagues who will speak to those matters that I do not address in my contribution. In addition, I intend to highlight our own vision and plan for the way forward. As I welcome the Honourable Minister of Finance, I trust my reply to his contribution will not be deemed sterile and academic by the Minister. We now know he frowns upon such interventions, and we know he is not adverse to throwing shade. You see, there is no difference between the Minister and the Honourable Prime Minister in that when the Prime Minister will tell members of Parliament to shut up, his Finance Minister's rude remarks at a chamber meeting trump and follow suit. After all, this is the tone of governance of this government. The Prime Minister openly declared that it is only at the Parliament that he knowingly associates with crooks. Well, all I would say is that he appears to know his members much better than we do. And then the Honourable Member says, trying to escape responsibility, he says that he is happy that he is not the Minister of Finance. But may I remind you, Madam Speaker, that if the Finance Minister is guilty as charged, the Prime Minister is guilty as sin. And therefore I agree with the Planning Minister. She is correct when she said, do not blame the Minister of Finance. Because you see, it is the Prime Minister who must carry the full responsibility for policy and governance. The passing of the buck must stop. This blame game must end. You blame the police for crime. You blame parents for delinquency. You blame public officers for corruption. You blame residents for flooding. You blame Kamla, well, for everything. And when you can't find Kamla, you blame Mala. Madam Speaker, I listened in this chamber, as you did, and I watched the Minister of Finance in his close to a 3-hour, some would say lackluster presentation. At times it was as though he didn't actually believe what he was saying himself. In a presentation, it was long in rhetoric, but indeed very short on substance. His presentation was interspersed with some epiphany highlights and paroxysms. Such usually occurred when the member resorted to the blame game and when his tax increases were being announced. Indeed, then the eyes gleamed. The tone, pitch, and volume of his voice reached a crescendo as his demeanor morphed to show excitement. And I was reminded, Honourable Madam Speaker, of a movie that I saw. It was a trilogy, The Lord of the Rings. And there was a character in that, Gollum was his name, and he would jump and dance in joy at the sight of the ring or the thought of possessing it.
Order, please.
That was the exact reaction I saw when the member began announcing tax upon tax upon tax. Noting the reactions from all sections of society to this budget, I get the sense of a growing despair among the citizenry. A population already battered by rampant crime, high food prices, unemployment, underemployment, has awakened to the reality of an uncaring government, placing an even heavier burden on their shoulders. In fact, some would say that the finance minister created a bit of history on this occasion. It is the first ever budget presentation in living memory to have alienated every single sector of the national budget. Madam Speaker, I confess that having been a member of this august chamber since 1995, having served 1 year prior to that in the other place, I have never ever felt so desolate.
Honourable members, I would like to hear the contribution from the Leader of the Opposition, as I guess all of you would like to. I would ask people to abide by Standing Order 53. And again, anybody being challenged can take a little walk and come back when they overcome their challenge. Please proceed, Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I was saying that I confess, having been in this chamber since 95, having been in the other place 1 year before that, I have never ever felt so desolate on my own behalf, but especially on behalf of citizens of our country, as I have been feeling in the aftermath of Monday's budget presentation. Indeed, today when I rise to contribute, I do so with the heaviest of hearts and a most worried mindset for the future of our country and the immediate short-term welfare for our citizens. Never in the history of this House have we ever had a budget presentation which essentially amounts to an act of terror against citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, one which would conscientiously and actively destabilize the economic standing of the country and, by extension, lives and economic well-being of the population. And I make this statement because, in my respectful view, the budget presented is bankrupt of ideas, it is bankrupt of a plan, it is bankrupt of a vision to take the country forward. And it is a budget that will bankrupt our country and our people at every level. I trust and pray that it will not bankrupt the Honourable Minister as well. And so this budget demonstrates a brutal betrayal of the people, littered as it is with rehashed, broken promises. In some cases, it is biased in favor of the super elite. It resorts to the blame game and the imposition of brutal fiscal measures against the population, which would further pauperize people. It would effectively reduce the middle class and working class into abject poverty, as massive job cuts and cost of living increases across the board become the new norm. What the country got was a budget presentation, essentially in the same old failed measures, and the policies announced as new ones were in fact cut and paste from previous budgets and PNM manifestos. So once again, even as the minister professed to change in the paradigm, we heard more of the same old, same old. There was nothing new. And even those measures that may seem positive are failing to convince the population of their ultimate effectiveness, simply because this government has absolutely no track record of delivery and keeping their promises. And to me, the greatest irony about this presentation is the lofty title presented by the minister, Changing the Paradigm, Putting the Economy on a Sustainable Path. To me, that is talk about further adding insult to injury with that name. The people of this country have been mandated to share the burden of adjustment, but indeed, it is this very PNM government which has failed in every aspect of governance. For 2 years, about 761 days, they have not been able to put forward any workable solutions to the problems facing us. Indeed, they have repeatedly broken the promises they made prior to the elections and thereafter. And by being bankrupt of a plan or a vision for the way forward, they are guilty of betraying, in my view, of brutalizing and betraying and pauperizing citizens. After listening for more than 3 hours, I was stunned that once again the minister could come to this house with a straight face to continue to blame the government which I led and repeat the same worn-out ideas from the previous budget presentations as though they were something new and innovative. What the country witnessed was a poor attempt at covering the current administration's failures in competence and ability to effectively manage the country's finances to take us where we need to go on a road to growth and development. Like many citizens, I waited to hear some positive news that would show us that a turnaround of the economy was coming, that there would be improvements in the lives of people. I was deeply disappointed, as so many others were. It is painfully clear that the majority of citizens feel this way and angry. The mass gathering outside this parliament today demonstrates that people are fed up. They are tired of the excuses and directives by this administration to do more with less, to tighten your belt, and above all, to shut up while those holding high office enjoy every luxury. No one is disputing that our country is facing economic challenges, many of which were exacerbated by the poor policy decisions of the government. We are very much aware of the impact of the sharp declines in global energy prices. However, any responsible government would assess the situation and develop a clear strategy, business plan to mitigate the impact and propose options to increase revenue generation. We have heard nothing in this regard, and it is likely that we will see further increases in borrowing and a worsening economic climate as a result of the ill-fated measures being put in place by the government. Instead of providing some hope to citizens, we heard more doom and gloom, which the government has been telegraphing to the population since taking office, and the finance minister was unable to stem the fears of the public about the country's economic future. The regurgitated 2020 vision, now transformed or morphed into 2030 vision, which the minister said he laid in the parliament on Monday, may I remind, was in fact laid in this house on the 21st of April 2017. A motion was moved to put it before a joint select committee. That motion was approved, but no committee ever met since that was put there. So that will remain, Vision 2030 will remain just that, a pie in the sky dream. The government has been campaigning for weeks at various public fora, boasting about achievements that are either not theirs or have not actually materialized, and warning about tough love measures that would be necessary to fix the crisis they have caused. Over the past 2 years, this country has been subjected to a government which has failed to look after the needs of people, choosing instead to focus on vanity projects, million-dollar paintings and cars, so-called disease, whilst at the same time cutting funding to critical areas such as in the healthcare sector, tertiary education sector, and with respect to the social safety net for children in this country. So what have they done in the 2 years they have been there? They gripe about not having money. They groan about my administration spending money. Well, let's look briefly at some of the things they have spent money on. Money we think has been wasted to date. 3.5 million for the chair of CL Financial on sexual harassment charges. Rom Singh Shamfa, $59,000 bill, telephone. $92,000 for a rump in Tobago. Massey Communications, $225 million. Lobbyists, well known to the Prime Minister, $18 million. Petrotrin strike costs $4 million. Ernst & Young, $20 million for audits. PwC, $10.5 million for audits. Brian Lara Stadium, about $100 million. So-called deceased, $3 million. Paintings, $3 million. House in Tobago, about $20 million. Jazz Festival, $12 million. Golf course in South, $0.25 million. And now $3 million for a golf course in Shagaramas. 2.5 million for a fet match to open the Brian Lara Cricket Academy. And of course, for your bestie, about 100 million on fake oil. So does this sound like a government without money? You just cannot fool all the people all the time. Their complete ineptitude and inability to govern effectively was once again brought to the forefront by the 2018 budget presentation. Citizens of our nation were once again left wanting, waiting to learn of concrete proposals, ideas and strategies to generate revenue, return to growth and prosperity, expand the economy into new sectors in order to reduce our dependence on oil and gas, foster innovation, provide sustainable employment. Instead, we got a presentation bankrupt of such proposals and strategies. When they came into office, remember, they promised to restore confidence and rebuild trust, imploring the citizenry, let's do this together. Then they put forward a blueprint for transformation and growth. Well, it seems that has been misplaced somewhere in an archive. And now the minister is calling for a change in paradigm. What a moron, sorry, what an oxymoron. This is an admission that all they did thus far failed, so they have to change their paradigm. But the budget presented clearly makes no paradigm change. None. We have absolutely no confidence in government, and they have shown that they cannot be trusted to fulfill any of the promises made. It is distressing to see all the good work undertaken by the government which I led, now crushed by this administration. The contradictions abound. They went to the Hyatt on the Wednesday before the budget, with the event, the spotlight event, before the budget, to announce to the nation that things are bad. Now this is an oxymoron too. Taxpayers paid Hyatt fees on the cost of refreshments and so on where? At the Hyatt, upscale Hyatt, only to learn that we are poor. Only to learn we are poor. Only by this government would you have such an oxymoron taking place. The contradictions do not stop there. At the very Hyatt spotlight event, old talk, whatever you want to call it, the head of the government reveals that the Sandals project is on hold, presumably because of a hurricane or the hurricanes. Mere days later, the Minister of Finance reveals in this budget presentation about the project being the centerpiece of the Tourism Diversification Trust on the flagship island of Tobago. Which one should we believe? What madness is this? Do they talk to each other? Is Sanders coming or is it going? And if their week was not outrageous enough, the minister gives the most incredulous Anansi story, that ministers took a salary cut by giving donations to charity. All UNC MPs in government or opposition, we give generously to charities, religious, cultural, social, other causes, other charitable causes from the birth of our party. We even gave a percentage of our salary to the Children's Life Fund. But when we give to charities, this is a normal work of an MP. It is not a pay cut. It is not a pay cut. If you really want to impress someone, really go and take a pay cut from the Treasury of Trinidad and Tobago. So if you make a purchase at a fundraising cake sale, you buy a piece of cake or curry or barbecue and so on, you want to call that a pay cut. So bankrupt are they of ideas. They are bankrupt on policy. They are bankrupt of plans. They are bankrupt of programs. And now you know what? The member for Princess Town can attest. They are now bankrupt of fashion. The budget presentation, with the associated rhetoric from government ministers on the media, also gives the fake impression that this budget places a fair burden on all sectors to contribute during economic hard times. Nothing could be further from the truth. It is common knowledge that taxes on corporations, hospitals, banks, the so-called wealthy businesses will do what? Will be passed on to the smaller man. At the end of the day, the patient who can't get treatment at the hospital will pay more at the private institution. The poor bank customer or account holders will absorb the bank charges, and the working class will pay for taxes or increases on tires, diesel, inspection fees, and so on. All these taxes to do what? So that this government, led by Prime Minister Rowley, can find $3 million to upgrade a golf course. This is obscenity personified. As I've stated, government has deepened the country's crisis as a result of very poor choices and policy decisions. I turn now to look at the state of the economy. And I'm constrained to look at that in terms of the attempts made by the minister to blame the government I led for the present state of the economy. The minister reminded me of a book I once read entitled How to Lie with Statistics. The minister, with golem-like glee, conveniently distorted and fudged numbers, and at times told outright untruths so as to lay blame at the door of the government I led. The minister conveniently switched the goalposts, switching the years he quoted from to suit his purpose. At one time it is 14, at another time it is 15. Let's just remember when we left office, it was at the end of fiscal 2015, and that's what you should be talking about, not going back before that. We must remember that the increase in expenditure in this country started under the PNM, and the increase in their expenditure represented the largest increase in expenditure in our history, moving from a budget of $15 billion in 2002 to $45 billion in 2009. That's when we came in. This represented a $30 billion or 300% increase over that 5-year period. In our 5-year period, our expenditure increased from $45 billion to $62. This was an increase of $17 billion or 36%. So you're looking at a 300% increase under that same government when the minister went down memory lane into 2009 and 2008, as compared to under the partnership 5 years, 36%. The suggestion by the minister is that the increase during the PNM tenure 2002 to 2009 occurred in the context of a similar increase in revenues is correct, but it strains credibility to suggest, as the minister did, that after 2009, that same government would have restrained expenditure in the face of about $100 per barrel for oil. In fact, there would have had to be a 0% change in expenditure over the last 8 years for the budget to come close to a balanced position today. In fact, at the moment, they are unable to reduce expenditure from the $50 billion level of last year, when they are saying that they need to cut their cloth to suit their coat. My government reduced expenditure to $57 billion in 2015 from the previous year's $62 billion. That was when the price of oil collapsed. And notwithstanding it was an election year 2015, we reduced expenditure. The further suggestion the minister makes is that the expenditure over 2010 to 15 was wasted, mismanaged, or stolen. The fact is that during our 5-year period, the country experienced the largest increase in output and employment in the history of our nation. You see, we were very fortunate. We had the best finance minister in the history of Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Larry Hawaii. Over the last 2 years, and over $100 billion has been spent, significant foreign reserves have been used, the HSF has been raided, and yet there is a feeling that nothing has been done, that the economy is stagnant and in fact declining, with only crime showing any growth. I turn now to the erroneous statements made by the minister with respect to NGC dividends. The minister gave the impression that the partnership government took $16 billion in dividends over the 5-year period 2010 to 15. In fact, that is totally incorrect. The truth is that in 5 years, 2010 to 15, my government took 12.7 billion in dividends. But that government, this present government, in just a short space of 4 months, Madam Speaker, has taken $3.6 billion. 4 months. From September 2015 to December 2015, $3.6 billion in 4 months. But the minister comes on every occasion about who maxed out and didn't max out and who was running on fumes. The minister gives him, Madam Speaker.
Members, I am hearing some unparliamentary language. Okay? I want to remind members the decorum of this House and ask members the same sort of respect that they wish accorded to them be also shown, so that any such words are not going to be tolerated. I ask members to please restrain themselves. Member, Leader of the Opposition, please continue.
Thank you very much. You see, Madam Speaker, these numbers are not fabricated from anywhere. They come from the very budget documents laid in this House this year, laid yesterday, and laid previously. In the review of the economy, you will find the numbers. You will find them in the estimates of expenditure. You will find them in all those fancy, pretty books over the period of time as we debate budgets in this House. And so that was another, I heard someone say liar cannot use it, but it was an untruth to say that we took 16 billion, when in fact they took the 3.6 in 4 months. The minister gives the impression that the entire 16 billion was taken by the partnership government. And that's where, I'm sorry.
Member for Port of Spain, North St. Anne's West. Please control the gusto.
Take a walk.
Take a walk.
They don't get walk.
Yes.
Members,
Yes.
let me control the deliberations, please. Leader of the Opposition, please continue.
Yes, thank you so much, Madam. So, another suggestion the Honourable Minister made, another statement of fact that the Minister made, is that the partnership government took 100% of profits of the NGC through the dividend. The Minister also said that the dividend policy of the NGC was to pay 50% in dividends, but we breached that policy and took 100%. That is totally inaccurate as well. First of all, the State Enterprises Manual allows government to take up to 100% in dividends after making allowance for required operating and capital expenditure. The NGC's cash flow was sufficient to allow for it to meet its cash requirements after dividends are taken into account. In every event, I want to repeat, the partnership never took 100% of the profits of the NGC. These points have to be made because the Minister has repeated them on many occasions in this House, and they're very important to refute the bold-faced inaccuracies in some of those statements. The Minister has also, I turn now to the issue of public debt, Madam. The Minister has also attributed the debt build-up to the partnership government, when in fact, when we came into office in 2010, the PNM had left billions in unsettled contractors' payments. They had left a 23 billion hole in its treasury with respect to CLF, for us to settle. It was a need to inject funds into CLF that strained the government's finances. This is substantiated, evidence can be found in a study done by the Central Bank, published in the Economic Bulletin, volume Roman XV 15, number 2 at page 101, where it states, the main impetus for the increase in the public sector debt to GDP ratio came from the government's bailout of CLICO rather than increased borrowing for deficit management. That is the truth. That is the truth. That's where it came from. And which government put us into that hole with CLICO? It was not a partnership government, but a PNM government. In addition to the $23 billion problem that the PNM left in 09-10, They also left about 13 billion Petrotrin debt that continues to be a major problem for the country. And we shall see when this debt comes up for repayment next year in 2018-19. Government will have to guarantee it because they cannot pay it. What goes around comes around, eh? Because those things happen during their term. The World GTL, the gas to liquids, the GOP, several of those projects, gas to liquids GTL, and the sulfur optimization project. As a government, we recognize that we had to fund the CLICO bailout, but at the same time keep debt low. And as a result, a number of projects were funded by internally generated funds, which is what placed a burden on the government's cash flows. We did not run out for foreign exchange, and the minister complained, why didn't we go out on a road show and get US dollars? Why did we take internal? Why didn't we take...
Notice. Please let this be the last time that I stand. Leader of the opposition.
Thank you again. Yes, why didn't we use internal debt? Why did we use external debt instead of internal debt? That's what we did. We did it first not to further burden what we owe in US dollars in the external debt. And we placed the burden on government cash flows, but we had the management with which to bring in the monies, and that's where we were. What the ministers tried to avoid explaining is why the debt has now increased to close to $100 billion. And they have nothing to show for it. Except paintings and so on, you probably have that. Or maybe a Mustang, I don't know. Madam Speaker, I turn to revenue and expenditure. And I move to something that is very important here in terms of understanding the state of the economy, the numbers, when we crunch the numbers to see the untruths that have been told to the people of this country. On 27 September, the Prime Minister addressed the nation at the Spotlight event. He began with, and I quote, the basic facts. He said then, and I quote, after enjoying energy sector revenues, taxes and royalties, 2010, 15.7 billion, 2014, 19.4 billion, 2016, 1.6 billion, 2017, 2.1 billion. In other words, and I'm continuing the quotation, the government was faced with a fall of more than 89% in its main revenue source between 14 and 17. Again, why using 14? Why use 14 when we demitted office in 15? I think it is because the revenue for 2050, which I explained already, we had dropped it when the oil prices went down, was less than 2014, as the fall in energy prices had already affected the economy. But that did not actually suit the picture. So, desperately, they wanted to prove. Again, the author of the book, How to Lie with Statistics, can learn a thing or two from these statements. It doesn't stop there. So first, the statements given 2010 energy revenues, 15.7 billion. 2014, 19.4 billion, 19.4. 2016, 1.6 billion. 2017, 2.1 billion. To accompany these pronouncements, the Honourable Prime Minister also provided a graph, which I can't hold up, but it's in the document, provided a graph of the information provided to the country. I got it from a copy of the graph taken off the website of the Office of the Prime Minister. And the figures displayed in this graphic that the Prime Minister was showing the population does not reflect at all what the words he was telling the population. In fact, the graph shows the central government energy revenues at around 6 billion in 2016. Remember, Prime Minister said 1.6 billion in 2016, and not the 1.6 billion the Prime Minister said. This was the first sign that something was wrong when what was said and what was showed did not match. Around the same time, the Central Bank published its long overdue economic bulletin. For some reason, the newly minted governor did not publish his second quarter bulletin. He went straight into September bulletin, but that's an argument for another day. And in this bulletin, September 27th, I believe, 2017, the figures were also different from the Prime Minister's figures. So the Prime Minister said one thing, showed another, and both of those were different from the figures from the Central Bank in that 27th September bulletin. But the mystery is compounded even further by the publications laid in this Honourable House on Monday, 4 days after the Prime Minister's ghost figures. According to the Review of the Economy 2017, page 96, Appendix 20, which deals with central government fiscal operations, current revenue, of which energy sector revenue is one. Here, fiscal 2016, what was the energy sector revenue? Not the 1.6 billion, not the 1.6 billion. The 2016 energy sector revenue was about $8.3 billion.
Wow.
8.278 billion, almost 8.3 billion. In other words, Trinidad and Tobago received 419% more revenue in 2016 than what the Prime Minister told his country just over a week ago. Shocking, Madam Speaker. The Prime Minister said his government received 2.1 billion in energy sector revenues, taxes and royalties. And Madam, what is the truth? I refer you back to the Review of the Economy, same page and table, same booklet here. There, the estimates is that the 2017 revenue estimates, energy revenue estimates, is received was not the 2.1 billion the Prime Minister told the country. In the Review of the Economy laid in here, in 2017, it is $9 billion.
Wow.
So why, Madam Speaker, that is 330% more money, well over 3 times more in revenue from the energy sector than what the Prime Minister told this country. Now, why did the Prime Minister present these figures, which do not appear in any other source, and which are hundreds of percent drastically lower than the true figures? Why did the Prime Minister understate our energy revenues? My question is, was he misled? Did someone mislead him? Or did he deliberately mislead the nation? That is my question. Yes.
As the second part, if you can say that in a different way. You see, deliberately misleading, please.
So there's a question. I will be guided, Madam. I want to remind you that these wrong figures were presented under the heading, the facts. And in the anxiety to undertake brutal policy prescriptions, is it then that we had to create a perception in the country that the country was worse off than it actually was? I ask public servants to take note, because the Prime Minister immediately used those ghost figures to wave his hatchet about the jobs of public sector employees being threatened. This begs the question, what are the real revenue figures in a scenario where the Prime Minister and his Finance Minister and the Central Bank all have different numbers? Perhaps more important, if anything can be more important, is the fact that every government considers its revenue in order to determine expenditure. Revenue determines policy prescriptions, project funding, salary negotiations, allocations to ministries, money to judiciary, the police, and so on. Your revenue stream is what will determine your policy director. So if we now have 3 and 4 different sets of revenue figures, which one do we use to create policy? Are we then going to be creating wrong policies, wrong priorities, and wrong decisions for the benefit of the country? But you know, revenue was not the only wrong figure presented. In the same presentation, the Prime Minister boasted, and I quote, from a level of record planned spending of 63 billion in 2015-16, the incoming new government immediately, cautiously moved to 53 billion in 2016-17, a reduction in expenditure of more than 15%. Madam Speaker, again, from the books laid here, in 2015-16, the PNM spent $52.9 billion, according to Review of the Economy, a reduction in expenditure of 4.5%, not the 15% that the Honourable Prime Minister told the nation. Again, the figures are wrong on the expenditure side. The Minister seems to be out of his league. He lacks the institutional knowledge and experience. As a result of being really without a plan or a clue, the Minister continues to prescribe policy initiatives all designed for environments that are too different from ours. In his first budget speech, the Minister announced that he would set in motion the achievement of a sustainable fiscal balance. I quote, "I will commence this process in fiscal year 2016 with a moderate budget deficit equivalent of 1.7% of GDP and continue the fiscal consolidation process to achieve a broadly balanced budget by fiscal year, you know when? 2018. At a time when energy revenue is falling, when tax revenue collapsing, this minister proclaimed a balanced budget in 2 years. In 2 years. The 2 years have come and gone. The 2 years have come and gone. And expecting to wish it into existence, the minister also predicted total revenues 60.3 billion in fiscal 16. In these circumstances, the minister projected expenditure of 63 billion. Now, this is the same minister today who is talking about citizens who expect budgets of 55 and 60 billion. Well, in his last two budgets, he really didn't pay heed to his own words, and talking now about a false economy. As any secondary econ student could have predicted, the minister was absolutely wrong. Revenues for fiscal 2016 fell by 1/3, hinged on a fall on the world energy prices. In the face of this drastic fall, government continued to spend in current expenditure of 53 billion in the 12-month period. From a negligible account, look at the current account balance of 50.6 billion in my last day in government, Minister Imber took this country into a current account collapse of 7.97 billion. My last year. This is when the minister told his house on numerous occasions that we were running the country on fumes. We had maxed out the overdraft. At that time, the current account balance was what? A mere 50.6 million. When we, at the end of the last fiscal year, we were in office. But this minister has taken our country into a current account collapse of 7.9, almost $8 billion, Madam Speaker. Last year was no different. Estimated revenues were 47 billion. Revenue actually collected was 20% lower than the estimate, despite significantly better revenue streams from the rebounding energy sector. It's interesting, in the last fiscal year we just completed, we got more revenue from the energy sector than anticipated. And this is a minister who had the goal, as I say, to say that the partnership government was running on fumes. We ran with 50.6 on the current account balance, million. This minister has taken that account to $7.97 billion. As we approach 2018, it is obvious that the minister will not be able to achieve his objective of a balanced budget anytime soon. Not going to happen. This time, estimated revenues at 45.7 billion, planned spending of 50 billion, the resultant deficit of 4.76 billion will have to be funded by even more public debt. Once more, Madam Speaker, the minister will fail to achieve his targets. The minister would have us believe that he's engaging in some sort of a paradigm shift, when the reality is that he's following the same roadmap he used in 2016 and 2017, which failed to achieve any of the objective targets that the minister had set himself. And so we're engaging in the same mistakes we started off with. The results are predictable. Trinidad and Tobago will continue down the slippery slope of bankruptcy. Under this minister, we have drastically fallen expenditure and also drastically falling revenue. But, Madam Speaker, this is not a parlor you're running. This is a country. And the policy perspectives are very different. While lowering government expenditure is good in some cases, in a recession that is not necessarily so. To boost the economy, government needs to provide incentives for people to spend, to stimulate the multiplier effect of expenditure, and in that way help to grow the economy. This is not rocket science. What this minister has been doing from his first day in office has been the reverse. It is elementary econ that if you raise taxes, you increase the cost of doing business, you invite the risk of reduced expenditure by economic participants, and so a reduction in tax rate intake is possible. The minister Some people call the minister the tax man. Everything is tax, tax, tax. And yet, so many new taxes, but the revenue from taxes is falling. The revenue from so obviously, that cannot be the new paradigm. That is the same old borrow, tax, and spend. Same old paradigm. That is not a new paradigm at all. The minister may be anxious to point to the standards and so on, but it's uncertain how much revenues we will ever be able to see and secure from that because of all the giveaways that may have happened in other countries with Sanders. Budget 28 thus far has to be the most severe manifestation of misalignment of policy, as virtually every revenue-raising measure, as I said before, will fall in the backs and pockets of one group directly or will pass on, and that is the middle and working class. You cannot tax a people into prosperity. You cannot. As all sectors, not just the energy sector, but the non-energy sector has declined markedly since they came into office, with overall growth declining by 6% in 2016 and provisionally 2.3% in 2017. As the government continues to max out every account the government has access to borrow from, the minister continues to demonstrate a lack of knowledge and competence in basic economics. The minister will be want to point to the several mega projects, highway construction, port development, new infrastructure projects, which don't of their own generate any money, at least not for the government and people, and which in fact includes significant maintenance costs. This at a time when the government has withheld expenditure in maintaining the existing infrastructure, resulting in some places in increasingly worse floods in areas which previously never had floods. More taxes and still less current revenue generation. This shortfall was on account of declines in revenues derived from taxes on income and profits of other companies, that is non-oil companies and individuals. So don't blame the fall in the energy prices. In fact, the energy prices went up this year. What you're seeing is that where you budgeted for more taxes, the fall in revenue is from the taxes, not from the energy sector. Energy, we know energy revenue is primarily determined by factors outside of our control internationally. But what is under the control of this government is the stimulation of the non-energy sector, which has been in continuous decline. And so the minister continues to look for areas to cast blame as to why the expected revenues have not come to pass. They are blaming tax evasion. But why under this new regime has this occurred? How come it is falling under this regime and did not occur before? Is it that there is more tax evasion now than there was in 15 and 14? Why, more importantly, has consumer demand declined? And takes us back to the issue of declined confidence of consumers in the economy. They have failed to protect the interests and overall welfare of consumers. Confidence in the economy is at an all-time low. There was a significant shortfall of $1.4 billion in expected revenue from VAT. The plan to generate revenue through their new VAT scheme has failed miserably. So how is it then? You're collecting less from VAT. You've put VAT across the board. Put VAT on almost 7,000 items that we had removed the VAT from. You've put it back on, and yet you're still coming down to less. In addition to having betrayed the citizens by imposing taxes on previously zero-rated items, the minister has fallen short badly of his end goal. This year, the minister estimates that we can expect to collect an additional $800 million in VAT. This can only be seen as the minister has already conceded to the pending upcoming price increases of basic goods and service, thus leading to expected higher estimates of revenue to be derived from VAT. But do you all remember the first budget the minister read when he estimated VAT revenues to be way above? And we all told the minister in this house, no, it was 12 million, that it will not be. And when we came back with the review of the economy, did not materialize. So once again, we have this dream, pie in sky dream, of getting additional money of 800 billion. In fact, I wish you good luck, Honourable Minister. Goods and services are going to go up. Citizens are going to be burdened furthermore by these additional increments. I turn now, Madam Speaker, to the issue of public debt. The utterances of the Minister, the Minister's comments, to our brave and hard-working business community have been called disrespectful by some persons. In his utterances, the Minister repeats again and again the misguided slogans of perhaps spin doctors, trying to make someone believe that my former administration was reckless, spent all the money, left the Treasury empty. Repeat, the Minister comes with that. You will recall the repeated accusations against the partnership government of maxing out the central bank overdraft by September 2015. The Minister unsuccessfully tries to continue this narrative, but I don't think he's fooling anyone anymore. The incompetence of the government, of which he is a member, can no longer be hidden behind arrogance and misdirection. Within weeks of taking office, they claimed that the country was running on fumes because the overdraft of the central bank was at 98%. The Minister said they barely had enough funds to service the country for a few days. Madam Speaker, the Minister went on to say, fortunately, this fiscal crisis was averted by prudent fiscal management, targeted budgetary support, timely intervention on the part of the new PNM government. That's the Hansard of the 5th of October 2015, straight out of the Red and Ready election. In the first quarter of fiscal 2016-17, when the Minister claimed, that's that same period, a few months after elections, when the Minister claimed the nation had no money, was running on fumes, the bulletin revealed the Minister drew down some $1.5 billion in that very same first quarter. So that was between September and December. Drew down $1.5 billion. Where did that come from? If there was no money, we were running on fumes, where did that money come from? It's simple. Someone is not telling the truth, and I prefer to believe the books and the review of the economy that are presented in this Parliament at every budget time. The debt crisis he claimed that the People's Partnership left him in was a figment of someone's imagination, perhaps created by PNM spin doctors. 1.5 billion is enough money to give every single pensioner over $16,000. 1.5 billion is enough to fully fund the GATE program for every student for 3 years. All of this from money the Minister claimed did not exist. That indeed, Madam Speaker, is fake news of a fake debt. A kind of chicken little politics is what it is, trying to convince the nation that the sky is falling because of the partnership, so that they do not see the incompetence of the PNM administration. They chastise my government for borrowing. The partnership borrowed money and delivered hundreds of projects, which have improved the lives of citizens. Real results. You can drive anywhere in this country and you can touch and you can feel and you will see the projects delivered under the partnership. Today, ask any one of the citizens standing outside the Parliament, now, how are they feeling? They will tell you they feel and see nothing but hardship from this government, whilst the government continues to distract the country from the raiding of the Treasury with nothing to show for it. Within 2 months of being elected, they came to Parliament to debate and use their majority to raise the borrowing ceilings by $50 billion so that they could borrow more money. When we demitted office, there was $13.3 billion in headroom under all those statutes which allow for borrowing. $13.3 billion in headroom under the External Loans Act, Development Loans Act, Guarantee of Loans Act. But they came to Parliament soon after they got into government to raise the borrowing limits by $50 billion to borrow more money. In addition to that, was the more than 1.5 billion, which we already knew they were going to borrow via the overdraft at the central bank. And this does not access loans under the IDB and IBRD Acts, Madam Speaker. So even more is the fact that as a result of the partnership government's actions, there were several outstanding payments due in 2016, which the P&M administration would have benefited from simply because they were in government. I speak of revenue that they would have obtained, money they would have obtained when they came into government in the 2016 fiscal, which included 1.5 billion from Phoenix Park IPO, 3.8 billion from a capital payment by TGU, a $500 million dividend from NGC, taxation in the sum of $41 billion. That is what they had. That is the revenue. Revenue was generated but entered onto the books in fiscal 2016, which really began, fiscal 2016 began when? September 2015 up to the month before, just before September 2016. So we doubled, Madam Speaker, the savings in the HSF. In 2010, when we got there, it was US $3 billion. When we left there, it was $5.6 billion. We left net foreign reserves of $12.6 billion. We left an economy that was growing, not even a minister could deny it. This is a far cry from when we came into government in 2010. When we came in, we met an economy in shambles. We inherited, as I told you, the $23 billion PICO debt, a $5 billion debt to public servants, another $1 billion to pay contractors, thanks to the then P&M, of which many senior members here were members of that cabinet. My government was confronted by over $30 billion in debt immediately as we formed the government. And I'm not here counting the public sector debt. Infrastructure was in shambles, flooding. Whenever rain set up, as they used to say, one person once claimed, excuse me, once rain set up, a person said once they claimed it was a stationary cloud. A minister said, I don't know, a stationary cloud led to flooding on the highway. Can you imagine? My government recognized it had to fund CLICO, I told you about before, and keep the debt low. Projects that today are being used by our citizens. So we met an economy then in a tailspin from mismanagement, waste, and corruption. We met the GTL scandals, billion siphoned off. A P&M government, of which the Minister of Finance was a part, saddled Petroshed with a $13 billion debt I mentioned before. Who can forget the billions lost in poor housing construction? The Minister of Finance was part of that as well. He was in that cabinet, as was the Honourable Prime Minister. The mention of Las Alturas should make every member on the other side hang their heads in shame. We met the MVCU, millions spent for a vessel that never worked. We met the Brian Lara Stadium with steel fabrication which failed structural inspections. We met a bill for a rocket rail in which billions had already been paid for nothing to show for it. And, Madam Speaker, every public servant will remember when we got into office in 2010, we were also faced with over 100 wage negotiations which had been abandoned by the P&M. When we took office, we were forced to fix the fumes of corruption and mismanagement. You know what? We faced these things head on. We took the tax base from 37 billion that the P&M had, and we raised it to 41 billion by 2015. When we left government, annual capital receipt was 4.9 billion. Unlike the incompetence of this P&M government, my team did not sit down and cry or try to blame everyone. We went to work and got the job done from day one. The people of this great nation elected us to govern, and that is what we did. I am pleased to say, Madam Speaker, that I had the honor and the privilege to have led the most productive government this country has ever seen. Through strong planning and delivery by a hands-on cabinet, we stabilized the economy, we put the country back on a growth path. Today, under this P&M administration, Trinidad and Tobago is in a nosedive. The government has betrayed the population's confidence and has not even delivered a plan, far less anything citizens could see or touch. From his slogan of "let's do this" to one of where we've reached today, from "let's do this," the slogan seems now to have become "let's do nothing." One thing is certain, after 2 years in government, they have pushed the public sector debt up by 23%. In their 2 years, 17.2 billion has been added in 2 years. Public sector debt, $17.2 billion more in 2 years. In these circumstances, it is obvious they will have a dependence on borrowing to finance government expenditure that will continue with consequent increases in the public debt. Madam Speaker, the Minister's confession that he is forced to borrow billions in order to pay salaries and other bills, as opposed to creating any type of revenue generation. Any bank in TNT would call this a different kind of borrowing to fill gaps, to borrow to fill other gaps, borrowing to fill gaps, to borrow to fill other gaps. Kiting, that's the word I was looking for, kiting. That, my friends, is not how to run a country. At this rate, they will incur the largest intergenerational transfer of debt in the history of our country. At this rate, not our children, it will go down intergeneration, down to our grandchildren will have to clean up the mess that is being made at this time. At present, under this government, every man, woman, and child has to face a debt of almost $70,000.
Wow.
And that doesn't include the mismanagement to come. Given the level of borrowing and public debt at present, it is clear the minister is hoping oil prices will not only rebound, but he must pray at night that it should reach at least $200 a barrel. Every right-thinking citizen knows that the government seems to not only be a stranger to the truth or strangers to the truth, but they also seem to be strangers to basic maths. Time and time again, the math just does not add up. And so I wouldn't go into who might be mathematically challenged or who might be an engineer or a lawyer and so on. But it is clear that in this budget statement, the projected deficit for fiscal 2015-16 of will be 2.8 billion. The actual deficit was 7.9 billion. So Minister estimated for 2015-16 a deficit of 2.8 billion. How on earth did that reach almost $8 billion? $8 billion. Total miscalculation. In his second budget statement, the minister projected a deficit of 6 billion. You know what that turned out to be? 12.6 billion and counting. 12.6. How can you be so wrong? How can you be so wrong in forecasting and planning for this country when all your estimates, all your targets have not been met? And then you want to talk about changing the paradigm and you come back with the same measures, the same borrow, tax, and spend. That is the same paradigm in which we are going into fiscal 2018. There has been no change whatsoever. Now the minister predicts a budget deficit of 4.7 billion. Well, given his track record with the math over the last two, I mean, there is no way. I don't see it adding up at all. The IMF projections based on inside information from the government are very disturbing. In its 2016 Article 4 report, the IMF warned that debt would continue to rise. The IMF has projections for public sector debt as a percent of GDP for the 4 years 18 to 21, and these are public sector debt from the IMF, the projections, because I'm saying I don't trust the projections of the Minister of Finance, given in the last two budgets they were never met, those were never realized. IMF is saying for 2018, public sector debt as a percentage of GDP, 68.2%. The next year, 2019, 77.9%. The next year, 87.9%. And then 97.9% respectively, 2018 to 2021. While central government debt, so that's the debt to GDP, the actual debt is projected as 48.5. We're looking at 2018 to 21, 58.2, 68.1, and 78.1 respectively over the medium term. This is indeed frightening, Madam Speaker. And I trust that someone on the other side would shed some light on whether these IMF projections are inaccurate or whether they're wrong. All of this paints a picture of gloom and doom under this incompetent government. And again, what are the prescriptions? What are the policies and programs to take us out of that pathway down in a nosedive, down, further down in every regard? What are the prescriptions? Well, I'll talk, Madam Speaker, as I go along because I want to look at the energy sector. It is true that we have a competitive advantage in energy, and we should not diss that. While we want to say we want to get out of the energy sector, we want to diversify, we want to remove the dependence on the energy sector, let us recognize it is a very important sector for getting us revenue. It is unfortunate that in addition to the distorted reality painted by the minister on the country's economy and its finances, misconstructions abound with respect to the energy sector. Again, things that are totally inaccurate, in some cases distorted. When we entered office in 2010, we were alarmed to learn that due to the policy stagnation of the previous PNM administration, investors were not interested in investing, exploring, or producing anything in Trinidad and Tobago in the energy sector. In fact, in mid-2010, there was only one rig working offshore. Did you know that? In mid-2010 when we came into office. As a result of the fall in investment from 2008 to 10, natural gas production started to decline in late 2010. And so the nation was facing a future revenue crisis, not because of energy prices, but simply because we were headed into a situation where production would continue to decline. To add to that, major upstream players entered a period of prolonged maintenance, and that is well documented. So this also impacted on production. So what did we do in the face of this upcoming crisis with respect to revenues from energy? What did we do? We attacked the problem head on with a series of policy measures as follows. We mobilized an aggressive exploration strategy by way of offering incentives to the seismic companies, the upstreamers, BP, Shell, BHP, and so on, so that we could find new reserves of hydrocarbon, new reserves. The turnaround in natural gas supply and the rebound in the energy sector that the Minister of Finance spoke about just on Monday is as a result of the projects we initiated 2013 to 15. Not so much as by your leave when those projects were mentioned. These projects include the BP Juniper, the EOG Sircan, BP Truck, and BHP Angostura Phase 3. Those are the projects going now. But you see, when you want to reap down the road, you have to plan today. You have to plan today. And so, the BP Angelin development is as a result of the surveys we did in 2011 to 2013 by BP. This same survey led to the success of the macadamia exploration well. These projects are what is responsible for the moderate growth the Minister of Finance spoke about in 2017 and to come in 2018. At the time of passing these incentives in the finance bill, this is what the then MP for Diego Martin, Northeast, not then Minister, MP, had to say. And I quote, "It is about time these fiscal incentives were put in place." You cannot believe it. Hansard, it's in the Hansard. It is about time these fiscal incentives were put in place. And the minister comes here, some would say like a hypocrite. I wouldn't say that about him. Comes here and says that these incentives have resulted in people you can't get corporation tax, also called as taxes from the energy sector. We can't get it because this government, my government, you gave it away. Somebody down that and shouted out, Kamla, you gave it away. Nothing is further from the truth. Nothing. And that's why I'm saying throughout this, there have been many, many statements made that are totally untrue. Nothing is further than the truth. So first of all, when we were passing the incentives here, the then MP said, it is about time these fiscal incentives were put in place. In many cases, these incentives were simply accelerated allowances. The allowances were permitted to be carried over a shorter period of time. In his budget speech last year, the minister confirmed that our accelerated incentives led to results. So first of all, then he said, yes, very good. Why it took so long? Then last year, when he's speaking about his same incentives, this is what the minister said. In recent years, there have been significant changes to the Trinidad and Tobago oil and gas taxation regime designed to stimulate production in mature fields and to encourage new field development. By and large, these changes have had a positive effect. But on Monday, Minister changed his tune. He criticized the accelerated capital allowances of 2014. Minister said the allowances were responsible for the energy sector not paying corporation taxes for the next 7 years. And this was one of the times when the voice, the eyes gleamed, and the voice went up, and the pitch went up, and the whole bench went up. All the theatrics, I've got them. All the theatrics. When the minister said, not paying corporation taxes for the next 7 years. Now, how can that be? When the capital allowances will expire according to law in 3 months' time, December 31st. December 31st, 2017. Does it mean that that government has passed a piece of law that we are not aware about, that they have extended that tax incentive time? How can a tax incentive expire in 3 months impact tax payments for 7 years? The claim is incredible. It demonstrates a gross misunderstanding of the workings of a huge part of the economy that he's entrusted to oversee. Everyone in the energy sector knows this. In January 2018, the system reverts to what obtained before April 2014. This means companies will still be able to claim the 100% of their capital expenditure for exploration and development drilling, only they will do so over a longer period of time. So all that was happening was accelerated. You had a shorter period of time. These incentives have had little or no impact on energy sector revenue, because the companies that operate in the upstream in the exploration and production license regime, they have made smaller profits or losses in the years 15, 16, and 17. So nothing to do with the incentives. That means there was little or no taxable income against which the allowances could have been applied. The incentives are not applicable to companies. I'm sorry, I'm getting disturbed here.
Oh, 53.
I would like to advise members to please observe the decorum of the House. I am being continuously disturbed by members on the right of the well. Please continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So here we are about these incentives. The incentives are not applicable to companies in the midstream and downstream petrochemical sector. And these are like Atlantic LNG, Point Lisa's companies, and so on. We still earn revenue from these mid and downstream providers. Increased production of natural gas should lead to increased production of high-value ammonia, methanol, and urea in the downstream sector, leading to more income from taxes. And in fact, if you look at the review of the economy, you would see that methanol prices have gone really very, very high. It's a shame that we had to let go of the MHDL plant based on agreements that had been entered into. So here we are. This may be at risk as the Energy Chamber Chairman, Eugene Tyre, stated yesterday, without clarity, I'm still getting this muttering and it's getting a little difficult, Madam Speaker, to think. Can I please have your protection?
Just like to caution members, this will be the last time. After this, members are going to be asked to leave the chamber. Please continue.
Thank you so much. I think what is worrying someone on the other side is when I said, I talked about increased production of natural gas will lead to increased production of high-value ammonia, methanol, and urea. And all, the natural gas will be coming, as I said, based on the projects we had undertaken, with the Jupiter project coming on stream, Silcam, and all those other projects are coming on stream. But this may be at risk, I'm saying, Madam Speaker. The Energy Chamber Chairman said this yesterday. Without clarity on policy and the right contractual terms, shareholders in downstream facilities will be unwilling to commit the necessary capital to maintain our highly successful mid and downstream sector. The central bank bulletin tells us that for the first 10 months of fiscal 2017, government collected, as I said before, 6 billion in revenue from the energy sector. It is simply not correct to say that the country it is not correct to say that the country was earning not 1 cent, and I'm quoting those words of the minister, for production of over 3 billion cubic feet of natural gas per day. And indeed, people did not know better. You know, everyone, wow, 3 billion whatever cubic feet. Yeah, 3 billion. And being told that the country was not earning, not 1 cent. Totally incorrect, Madam Speaker, totally incorrect. These statements are inflammatory and could be quite damaging to the reputation of companies that we do business with. Lower prices, lower production, carry forward losses have never led to lower collection of petroleum profits tax. That's the corporation tax the minister said. He said also known as petroleum profits tax. Perhaps if the minister wants to increase revenue, the minister could prevent companies from claiming carry forward losses, which are permitted by Section 16 of the Income Tax Act. I think this would be unwise, however, but if the minister, in his constant quest for new sources of tax revenue, is known by some for his unwise decisions, he may want to follow that route. Madam Speaker, in fiscal 2018, our natural gas supply will benefit from an 18% increase in natural gas production, the seeds of which were sown when? In 2010 and 2014 under the partnership government. I want to tell you, Madam Speaker, when we govern, we don't govern for tomorrow, we govern for the future. Not one new project has ever been conceptualized by this new PNM administration. In the entire 2 years they have been in office, they are living off the fruits of the labor of the previous. Hand in hand, lack of plan and execution has been a loss of confidence in our business. And this was not helped by the industry-wide confusion caused by the minister's statement with respect to the royalties and this petroleum taxes. The loss of the Angeline platform fabrication to Mexico remains a source of deep disappointment to us. We lost 300 jobs. That could have brought us in US 200 million in FDI, in foreign direct investment. Because you know why? Do you know why? They blame the workers. It's not the workers, Madam Speaker. It is because the NGC failed to finalize a new contract with BP before the end of 2016. They blame the workers. It says the workers and the strikes and so on. The NGC failed, I am told, to finalize a new contract with BP before the end of 2016. It was a mishandling of the relationship with MHTL that led to the closure of 2 of their plants in February of this year and the loss of hundreds of jobs. And of course, ArcelorMittal packed up and left in March 2016, taking with them about 600 jobs. Today, the relationship between government and multinationals has been damaged. A further sign of poor stakeholder relations is demonstrated by the press release that BP put out a few days ago, saying that they need, and I quote, much more clarity on the details in the budget. That means they do not understand what the minister said. As it related to his statement on royalties and taxes, the largest player in the TT energy sector, the third largest in the world, is confused with what was delivered here. That is an ominous sign for our economy. As we cement our reliability and expertise in a now very competitive region, remember, yes, Trinidad was Trinidad and Tobago, Trinidad. We were number one in Caribbean. Look, we are in a very competitive region right here, because now we have seen Guyana and Grenada's recent oil finds. Wow. And if you don't have this relationship with the multinationals, then they will pick up their riggers and the rig and go. They will go, Suriname as well. And then, of course, we have the threat of massive shale oil and shale coming out of the United States, that our little bits of oil and gas, if we don't work properly, can be thrown out. We need to make sure, as we cement our reliability and expertise in this region, we need to make sure we are still seen as a primary choice for multinationals to invest. For this to happen, we need to have better relations and understanding with stakeholders. We worked hard, you know. We worked hard to maintain a relationship with stakeholders based on mutual respect. We understood that a balance had to be struck between the country's interests and the developers' interests, with consideration to the wider global environment. I turn now to the issue raised by the Honourable Minister about royalties from the energy sector. What of these changes about royalties? The Minister said he will apply a fixed royalty of 12.5% across the board. Will the royalty arrangements be applied to production sharing contracts? Companies operating with the PSCs, production sharing contract, they don't pay royalty based on the actual contract they have, the contractual arrangement. Companies that operate exploration and production, like BP, with their license, and Petrotrin, they pay royalty, and in some cases, that is at a rate of about 10%, and others it is in about 12.5%. These agreements would have to be amended if the government were to add a new royalty provision. Has the government already gotten the consent of the pertinent energy companies? You have a contract with them. Have you gotten their consent now to change their contract? They share production with the government, and that is how the government receives its share, the production sharing contracts. BP has been paying its royalty in kind since 2006 based on an agreement to supply royalty gas. That is what had been agreed to by the late former Prime Minister Manning. This royalty gas, supplied by BP on behalf of the Minister of Energy to NGC at no cost. Royalty gas, not money, not cash. What has happened to that arrangement? Is the government now going to take cash instead of the royalty gas, natural gas? We need some answers to that. The Minister has given no details on how he plans to implement this new royalty regime and how much money he expects to get from it. And of course, stakeholders are confused. Even worse, as I said, the chairman of the Energy Chamber indicated that the government had outlined its desire for a new tax regime in the last 3 annual budgets, and despite consultations, there is still a lack of final resolution and clarity about exactly what is intended. And true, we've been here, every budget the minister has brought, we are going to harmonize, we are going to reform the fiscal regime in the energy sector. Broken promise 1, broken promise 2, and again now promised in this budget. Third budget. And you know, listen, this is your third budget, you know. If you stay and last out, you only have 2 more to come. Only 2 more to come. This is your third budget. And as I said, this is a bankrupt budget to take country forward. When we left office in 2015, we left a natural gas master plan. That document has been laid in Parliament recently, totally almost, I think nothing has been altered. As the Minister of Finance likes to say, not a comma or a semicolon has been changed. The Minister of Energy in laying it was so impressed that he hailed it as pioneering. This historic document speaks to the way forward for the energy sector, and it says we must continue to be competitive in upstream, and in so doing, we will continue to attract investment, not scare it away. That gas master plan, which we commissioned, this government has sat on for over 2 years reviewing, repeatedly in it, the plan repeatedly employs the government to immediately mobilize an aggressive exploration campaign to find new reserves of gas, to maintain a highly successful fiscal regime which we implemented. And I had explained earlier, that is what we had done when we went into office, aggressive exploration campaign. The master gas plan is saying to do that. You've sat in it 2 years, so you know exploration campaign has yet started. And these things take years to be monetized and to come on stream. It is also an understanding that come 2019, NGC will be paying significantly more for natural gas from BPTT and EOG resources, and this will put further pressure on profit margins at NGC and Point Lisa. Now, the Prime Minister has gone on record as admitting that he negotiated a gas price on behalf of the NGC with EOG resources in a meeting in Houston in March 2017. At that meeting, there were no officers of the NGC present. There were no officers of the Ministry of Energy present. The Prime Minister was accompanied by Minister for Policy North, St. Anne's West. Now, this is a very strange thing. The Prime Minister is not a contracting party in this matter. It is a matter between NGC and EOG. They are the contracting parties. It was therefore, in my respectful view, highly improper for the Prime Minister to assume the role of the NGC and lead negotiations on their behalf. This incident has led to the fixing of natural gas prices by the political directorate, namely the Prime Minister, and has undermined the board of the NGC and its management. Such a course of action flies in the face of transparency. It is our understanding that because of this intervention, NGC will now have to pay significantly more for natural gas in 2019, and this will negatively impact the competitiveness of the entire natural gas sector. On the issue of hybrids, I again say that in 2014, the Partnership Administration removed the motor vehicle, the MVT and VAT on hybrids under 1999 CCs. In the next budget, the Minister of Finance, our then Minister of Finance, went a step further, removed all taxes on hybrids. And this created a surge in demand for hybrids. This was the right direction to take the nation. It was progressive and it was green. It was in keeping with the global trend which sees the proliferation of hybrids in the developed world. Sadly, the minister sought to penalize this growing segment of the car industry just when it was taking off. To cut off vehicles over 1599 cc's, in my respectful view, is a step in the wrong direction. In fact, there are only a few hybrid vehicles which fall into the classification 1599 and under. So we reversed the policy so that only very few vehicles would be accessible. The exemption represented a discount of more than 50%. This means that family-friendly vehicles, larger engines, may not be within the reach of families who may want to go to hybrid route because the cost has gone up and so on drastically. So, once again, is the average income earner desirous of becoming more environmentally friendly and benefit from the government's willingness to support this, that door has been shut in their face. I move on, Madam, from energy matters, but I will return on the issue of the sale of assets under the heading of procurement with respect to the sale of TGU shares, which was announced in the budget last year, and I think we have some areas of concern there. Procurement, public accountability and transparency. And this is an area, Madam Speaker, which it will be worthwhile to remind ourselves of a ruling given by our Court of Appeal in the Minister of Planning and Sustainable Development versus the Joint Consultative Council. I have footnoted the reference here, where the Court of Appeal has stated, it may be worth reminding ourselves that whereas freedom, transparency, and accountability are the hallmarks of a participatory democracy, secrecy lies at the heart of dictatorships, from our Court of Appeal. What we have experienced over the past 2 years clearly signals to every right-thinking Trinidadian and Tobagonian is that this regime is clearly on the pathway to dictatorship. And they have a lot of secrets which are being uncovered one by one. It is not a coincidence that every single piece of legislation enacted in this country, which seeks to promote transparency and accountability, has been by non-PNM governments. It was a UNC government, for example, that was responsible for the passage of the Integrity in Public Life Act, the Proceeds of Crime Act, the Judicial Review Act, the Freedom of Information Act, the Equal Opportunities Act. It was a partnership government which had the vision and will to amend the standing orders of this Parliament to allow for establishment of JSCs to hold government accountable for the action. I am proud to say that our changes to these standing orders, the changes have allowed the Ferrygate inquiry to progress, thereby allowing the nation to see what is really happening under this government. This is changing the way we hold our elected officials accountable for decision-making. We want to also remember that it was a People's Partnership government responsible for the enactment of the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act. The passage of this piece of legislation represented the delivery of a manifesto promise we had made, that we would lay it in the Parliament within 30 days of coming into office in 2010. And so said, so done. We laid the entire package here. And the objects of that act, of the bill, was to promote principles of transparency, accountability, integrity, and value for money, efficiency, fairness, equity, and public confidence, and local industry development, sustainable procurement, sustainable development in the public procurement process, as well as the disposal of public property. So whether you are acquiring goods or services or property, or whether you are disposing or selling them, you would have this transparency. You know, I make no apologies today in saying that there seem to be some officials in government who have deliberately delayed the implementation of the procurement legislation over the past 2 years.
Why?
And we will have to ask whether such delay was to facilitate some in ensuring that they fill their pockets of their friends and their financiers. Even while we were in government and working on the bill, we had difficulty working with the then opposition to get the bill passed. They opposed us at every point. Every point. We got it passed. Now this government, that opposition, non-government, is stalling. The record speaks for itself. So we passed a piece of legislation, Madam Speaker, but it is not put in place. Over and over, government has promised they would implement the legislation. They just aren't getting it done. They promised on the 2015 manifesto, they promised in budget 2016, promised in budget 17, and now again in budget 18, the same promise is being made in all three of their budgets. We expect what the minister told us last year. In his last budget statement, he didn't just say we will do it in this, he said we will do it by March 2017. Well, March has come and gone. And now we've been told it will be done in 2018. This is a record of the PNM, a government of broken promises and betrayal. Now, Madam Speaker, I had to write to the President to warn the Office of the President that the Minister and the Minister of Finance's involvement in the process for the appointment of the procurement regulator was unlawful and illegal and would result in the entire process being corrupted. You recall budget debate?
In imputing improper motives. Nobody has corrupted the process of procurement.
Leader of the Opposition, please continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It was conspicuously, it was noticeable in the budget statement that no mention was made of the involvement of the Ministry of Finance and or the Minister in the appointment process. I recall in this very Parliament when the Minister indicated that they would hire through the Ministry, persons who will make up a short list of persons for the procurement regulator and send it. I'm saying that I wrote to His Excellency, the Office of the Prime President, to say that if that process be followed, it would be unlawful and would corrupt the independence of the process. What are the consequences of the non-implementation of procurement legislation? We have seen government spending about $110 billion over the last 2 years. And so, for 2 years, the promises of good governance, transparency, accountability, and so on. We need procurement legislation to protect our country, Madam Speaker. The government tries to distract the population with allegations of corruption about everybody sitting here. People have grown wary of that. They don't want to hear about blame Kamla. They just want the government to do something, anything, to ease suffering, and they want transparency and accountability. Let me demonstrate some of the things that have happened due to the lack of the procurement legislation to prevent corruption. We have seen a relative of a minister securing a $400 million contract for construction of the first segment of a highway. The country was told the transaction was transparent because the minister recused himself when the matter was being discussed. A financier of the PNM was able to secure a contract for the rental of a barge and cargo carrier at a cost of about $22,000 per day to service the sewage. I wonder if anyone recused themselves from the deliberations for the award of this contract. Special procurement processes were used because they said the situation was urgent. Contracts have been awarded for extension of the Solomon-Hoocher Highway to Point 14. Contracts in excess of millions of dollars awarded for the completion of the works Brian Lara Stadium. Contracts awarded for the lease of Cabo Star, Ocean Flower 2, under the supervision and control of the Minister of Works and the Port Authority, and we've been seeing the JSC, what has been coming out of that. This was also done through special procurement processes because they said the situation was urgent. These contracts are more than $1 million per month, Madam Speaker. The list does not include contracts for hundreds of millions of dollars awarded by special purpose companies and so on. And so all of this has been done in 2 years with the delay with respect to implementation of the procurement legislation. There is no clear transparency or accountability in those processes. I come now finally to TGU, Trinidad Generation Company Limited. The Minister of Finance announced in 2016-17 budget statement government's intention to sell a percentage of its shareholding in Trinidad, TGL. So remember I said procurement is about acquiring goods and services and property, but it's also about disposing. So here it is. Government has announced its intention to sell TGU, sell shares. I quote, the sale of 20% of TGU shares to institutional investors such as NIB and Trinidad and Tobago Unit Trust Corporation. This measure is expected to generate about $600 million. That was then, 2016-17 budget statement. Upon the midterm review, May 10th, right here, 2017, the plans of the government suddenly and drastically changed, and the minister announced the divestment of TGU by Union Estate. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Please go.
Thank you. The divestment of the TGU by Estate Electricity Generation Company is also advancing. After a review of our earlier position to dispose of 20% of the shareholder of TGU to certain local institutional investors, we have now determined that it is more appropriate to pursue the introduction of an independent power producer or other suitably qualified private sector investor into the ownership and operations of TGU. So first we were selling our electricity generating plant, TGU. We were selling to institutional investors, local, NIB, Unit Trust. And then that changed. And we are now talking about selling to some private sector investor. We propose a new shareholder would hold up to 40% of the shareholding in the company, with another 10% offered to the public. So now, the new shareholder, the private man,
1%.
40%, with another 10 offered to the public, to the three, John public, and or institutional investors. The proceeds of this divestment exercise are estimated to range from $3 billion to $5 billion, because look what's going on. When Minister talked about it first, it was 20%. The intake was expected to be 600 million. Now it's jumped. You're going to sell 40%, and with another 10%. How are you going to sell now? 50%. 50%. And I warn government about what happened with MHTL. When MHTL was a minority, and when government was the majority with the institutional investors, you will remember Mr. Dupre and Pico had sold their shares in MHTL. And when they sold it, the Ferrostal and Proman triggered clauses in the contract. And when we went to arbitration in the United Kingdom, we did not lose. All right. Madam, please. The Minister will have his time to speak.
I just want to know if there's an interruption being made in accordance with the standing orders. Is there? Please proceed.
What happened with MHTL, madam? Going up to the arbitration in the United Kingdom, what they had triggered, they said that the shareholding, it was oppressive, that they were the minority, and it was oppressive, and the court held that. And that is how Trinidad and Tobago had to sell the shares to MHTL. That's how it happened. I'm warning government. One of the same companies involved in that deal, Ferrostal, is the one now that you want to sell this thing to. Whoa. You want to sell TGU.
Whoa.
We propose the new shareholder will hold, as I said, 40% and so. The proceeds, $3 billion to $5 billion, depending on final valuation, and the quantum of shareholding divested with these proceeds compensating for potential shortfalls in any other one of government sale of assets program. Further details will be made public in due course. Of course, 2016-17 fiscal finished, we heard no further details. Even though in September 2016, the government decided to divest 20% of TG to local institutional investors, within a few months it went to 40% to an unnamed entity. What changed? What was the process to sell to this unnamed entity? This decision by government clearly demonstrates the policy of this government to tax and sell off the assets of the country to raise revenue. I would like to ask the Honourable Minister, is it correct that by Cabinet Minute number 922 of May 25, 2017, the Cabinet agreed, and I quote, the Ministry of Finance and the Union Estate Electricity Generation Company Limited, with appropriate consultants, managed the sale of Trinidad Generation Unlimited Plan to Ferrostal GmbH for 40% of TGU, with another 10% offered to public and private institutional investors. Minute number 1529 of September 20, 2016 refers. All relevant consultancies be engaged by Union Estate Electricity Generation Company Limited, whoever they are. And they will act on behalf of the Ministry of Finance, with costs to be on a reimbursable business. So you'll have to pay them costs as well. I want to ask, through you, Madam Speaker, whether on the 13th of January 2017, the Prime Minister received a private courtesy call from Ferrostal in or about, and I'm asking the question, the 13th of January 2017. Did the person known as Ken Julian accompany Ferristal on that courtesy call? Madam Speaker, this is a transaction valued between $3 to $5 billion. This is an asset valued at $3 to $5 billion. It belongs to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Let me explain the extent to which this administration would go to hide their secrets. Remember, I quoted from the Court of Appeal judgment talking about democracy and openness, but corruption is about secrets, and dictatorship is about secrets. When, Madam Speaker, the Cabinet minute is dated 25th May 2017, okay? 2 weeks later, 2 weeks, Madam, on the 9th June 27, MP Lee had the following exchange with the Honourable Prime Minister during PMQs on this issue. MP Lee, and I quote, "Thank you, Madam," and so on. To the Honourable Prime Minister, would the Prime Minister say whether government has reached an agreement to divest 40% of TGU to a private sector investor? Check the dates, Cabinet Minute, 25th May 2017. And this is a question being asked by MP Lee 2 weeks later, 9 June, right here in this Parliament. Prime Minister, Madam Speaker, the Minister of Finance, I'm quoting from your answer, the response, the Minister of Finance, in his capacity as corporation sole, is currently exploring the divestment of 40% of TGU, and there is no agreement at this time.
Wow.
And there is no agreement at this time. The process is the widest process, I'm still quoting, having indicated in the national budget a public expression that we are interested in receiving from interested parties, and we are prepared to divest. We are considering offers. We are inviting persons who may be interested. So maybe Ferristal was interested, was invited for a meeting, maybe. We are inviting persons who are interested. International companies that are working in TNT in the area. We are looking at the broadest spectrum, and the Cabinet will determine, based on the offers, what is the best option for the government of Trinidad and Tobago. End of quote for the Honourable Prime Minister. So again, I'm asking whether, could the government indicate whether there was no agreement on the matter of the sale on June 9, 2017, when there was a Cabinet decision on May 25th, 2017, to sell 40%. These are the things that would be avoided if the procurement legislation was in place. We really need perhaps a GSC, because that's one way in which we try to get the truth of it. So when the Prime Minister answered the Honourable MP for Pointe-a-Pierre, well, it's very difficult not to go in the wrong place with this, but when was he correct when he said that there was nothing? Is the Cabinet note a fake note? What is the true answer, Madam Speaker? What is there to hide? Why is this transaction shrouded in secrecy? The Cabinet apparently had taken the decision to dispose of the country's, one of the country's most valuable assets. And Madam Speaker, may I say with the greatest of respect, I do not believe that the electricity grid, the supply of electricity for the nation, should be placed in the hands of a private investor. There are some things that you must retain control of for the safety and the national security of your country. Madam Speaker, what was the process for this to happen, for the sale by sole select tender and the selection made? That's why, Madam Speaker, I warn that by the time the procurement legislation is implemented, there will be very little left, Madam Speaker, of the assets of the country. I want to ask, what was the procurement process that was engaged in selecting Ferristal? What were the names of the other firms that were considered? What, if any, due diligence was performed on Ferristal?
Might I ask the member for Debo Martin notice, if you kindly take a little walk and you... I'd also like to remind members on the left side of the well that the clapping of the desk can also be considered a disturbance.
You know, it's the second time.
Member for Couva South. Member for Couva South. Member for Laventille West. I'm on my list. Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, Madam Speaker. Back to Ferrostyle. Who were the consultants engaged by Union Estate Generation Company Limited? Why is the sale being negotiated by UEE GCL with appropriate consultants? And that is a holding company for the Union Estate and not by TGU itself. Why are we using the holding company and not TGU? What payments for relevant consultancies are there? Are there not state officials, technocrats, general managers and boards to negotiate a sale? Is there in place at this time a fully constituted TGU board? Was it legal for the government to sole select a purchaser without any tender process for the sale of one of our country's most valuable assets? Again, the question as to selling it to a foreign company. This decision would obviously affect the delicate NGC, TNTAC, and TGU agreements, which will in turn adversely affect the price of electricity to citizens of this country. And, you know, just today an article appeared in a newspaper, Madam Speaker. I think it was the Trinidad Guardian, which dealt with increases in rates for WASA and for TNTEC. And, you know, as far as I'm aware, the IRC is the body charged to deal with rate hikes. And here it is that the chairman of the IRC, I think her name is Ms. Heisenguy, Regulated Industries Commission. This is the commission I'm referring to. Ms. Guy said in a telephone interview yesterday, we anticipate that by the first quarter of 2018 we will be complete with both reviews of WASA, TNTEC. So far, a framework for reviewing the rate of TNTEC has already been done, while one was being developed for WASA. The review process will include 3 phases, and it continues. Ms. Guy said the RIC has been working apace with the review process for the last few months. Once reviews are completed, the new rates will be handed over to WASA and TNTEC, following which the population would be informed. Had the rates been done incrementally, we would not have been so far behind. So here it is, a chairman is already signaling an increase, based on the minister's statement, of course, that they will assess the matter, is here saying that the rates are going to be increased. Ms. Guy said the public can seek recourse should both utilities fail to deliver proper service. Then they will go to, after the new tariffs go into effect, should the utilities fail to deliver proper services after the new tariffs go into effect, Ms. Guy said the public can seek recourse. So it's coming. The new rates are definitely coming. So we are going to be selling off our TGU shares 40% and 10%. And I'm asking, we wonder how this will impact the review of the rates. Well, we don't have to wonder anymore because they're going ahead. The silence of the minister regarding this transaction. No report to the Parliament that you have reached an agreement, a decision to sell off the TGU. So, you know, question is, are we going to wake up one morning and find that Lake Ashford no longer belongs to the people of Trinidad and Tobago? It's been sold to a friend or an acquaintance? Is this what is planned for Petrotrin and Trinma assets? Government should sell out the assets belonging to the people right before our eyes, and we don't know. This is where again the procurement legislation should be implemented forthwith. And in this budget, the Honourable Minister of Finance has proposed 3 ministerial committees to do some serious things, you know, to give out housing and land, to give out grants, and to give out loans. One is to be chaired by the Prime Minister that will have the power to give out state lands as part of the government's housing program. Another has responsibility for approval of loans, approval of agricultural grants in the sum of, I think, a total of about 20 million, to give out grants.
Political.
A ministerial committee. Today, a third has responsibility under this budget to approve loans to small businesses in the sum of a total $50 million. Madam Speaker, where are the tender laws of this country? Where are those laws? We have the Central Tender Board Act. That government moved out, changed that a lot when they amended it to create special purpose companies and then put tendering committees within those special purpose companies. And now what are we hearing here? Ministerial committees to give away land, to give away grants, to give away loans. You know, Honourable Prime Minister, today on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, I call upon the Honourable Prime Minister to put a halt to these initiatives. Do we really want a ministerial committee to give out money, to give out land? Do we really want that in this country? I don't care who is the government. We cannot allow this to happen. This is a process that people don't want. The government has to stop these initiatives. It will be clear if they don't, that they want to avoid transfer. What about political patronage, man? Political patronage, these grants, loans, and so on can be used for that when you put it in the hands of the politicians. And I'm sorry to say that implementing these initiatives, instead of relying on procurement legislation, makes it look like the government is trying to sneak in political slush funds in these three things. Madam Speaker, the resources that are available to us as a country are blessed, and we are very blessed to enjoy them, but they are finite. We simply cannot waste and squander our limited resources to satisfy anybody's political desires and to fuel corruption. The Public Procurement and Disposal of Property Act was enacted to strengthen our democracy, to ensure the procurement of goods and services by the state and disposal of property will be transparent and equitable. And so the entire purpose of it was to help to deal with corruption, to promote efficiency and integrity in the procurement process. Is it then, when you have a politician determining whether you get the agricultural grant, what do you have to prove to that politician? What would you have to do? I heard a statement coming out when the Honourable Prime Minister, when asked about a particular individual, the Prime Minister said, when asked if that person contributed to the campaign, the Prime Minister is reported to have said that, well, if I would expect, if you are my friend, that you would contribute to the campaign. And that is a dangerous trending when it comes to putting the matters like these in the hands of politicians. Call upon the government to operationalize this Public Procurement Act as soon as possible. Madam Speaker, there's another area which is cause for concern. The government blames all and sundry for failures. Every act of corruption is blamed on everyone else other than the cabinet or the Prime Minister. No one takes responsibility. No one is held responsible. They accuse hard-working and dedicated public officers of corruption, fraud, and mismanagement. You know, when senior public officers refuse to toe the line, as in the Ferrygate scandal, they attempt to throw them under the bus. Throw them under the bus. A very disturbing development is in the news that the Ministry of the Attorney General, repeat, not the police, not the office of the DPP, a ministry with not one, not two, but with 3 cabinet rank ministers, is now seizing computers and mobile phones.
Dictatorship.
I am not aware that a ministry can move into anybody's property to seize computers and phones. This statement was made by the Honourable Member for Port of Spain North in a post-cab briefing, and it is carried in the newspapers today. A ministry cannot, under what law is this being done? Who is, I'm sorry. Ouch.
Getting a sense of restlessness in the chamber. I'm just asking members to be mindful. If it is that members feel restless, they again can take a little walk and come back. Please continue, Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you so much. I think perhaps they allow me to get 1 second off my feet. So I'll proceed from there. So here we are, no responsibility. Under what law does the Ministry of the Attorney General have the power to seize phones or laptops or computers? And then when they seize, who is examining them, Madam Speaker? A ministry cannot seize equipment from another ministry. That's the job of the police acting in accordance with the law. This is a dangerous development. Dangerous development. It is more in line with the third world banana republics of the last generation. Now we are getting reports of senior officials of government pressuring public officers to take actions or sign statements as part of a political witch hunt. I appeal to all hard-working public officers not to be intimidated, not to be harassed or bullied by a failing regime. I call upon senior officers to resist political pressure to break the law and call upon you to stay faithful to your oaths. We are committed to the rule of law. We will not allow this government to intimidate public officers or law enforcement officials. We commend all police officers for trying their best to deal with crime under the weight of an incompetent government lacking a plan and the political will. And I want to remind our country that when we were in office, we were able to bring crime down, serious crimes, to the lowest ever in 33 years. And when we did that, when the murder rate was on decline, when in 1 year we went 47 days without a single murder, all of that, you know what? We work with the very same police service that is in place today. Don't blame the police. Don't blame the police. If crime is out of control, don't blame the police. Blame yourselves, since you cannot give the direction, resources, and the plans to those in the police force eager to do their best. And that takes me on to the next topic, Madam Speaker, national security, as we go forward. I started off with the article by Slaughter from the World Economic Forum, September 2017, about the 3 core responsibilities of a government. That's what governments are there for. I talked about being protector, I talked about being provider, and I talked about being investor in people. I want to go to that fundamental, paramount duty of any responsible government, which is to be the protector of the people who elected them to govern. If a government cannot protect its citizens and cannot guarantee safety and security, a government has lost its legitimacy to govern. The importance of the government's duty to protect our citizens is the first right enshrined in our country's constitution. Right to life, liberty, property, and security of the person is an enshrined, constitutionally guaranteed right, guaranteed by government to every citizen of our country. That right is breached and violated with each crime, whether murder, robbery, and so on, that is suffered on a daily basis in this country. The people are under siege at the hand of criminal elements. Murder and mayhem grips our country each day, and it seems as though people have become numb to the killing and bloodshed, and it seems that the government has become oblivious to the suffering and carnage. The most important issue and concern in our country today is the need to protect your families and your property from criminal elements. Nothing is more important to people now. Never before have we been so unsafe. We are living in very perilous times. I have read the statistics many times here. I will not go into those in any great detail today, but the level of fear being experienced on a daily basis is unprecedented. People are no longer prisoners in their homes. Remember the days when we used to say that, you're prisoners in your homes. People are now becoming victims and statistics in their own homes. Our homes have become new hunting grounds and killing fields for criminals. Never before have a woman or children or elderly been under attack as they are now. No one is spared from the wrath of criminals. And the government in all of this has proven to be hopeless and helpless and bankrupt to offer any solution to give comfort. Never before have I felt the pain for elderly and children so much. It is a pain felt by the entire population. The loss to our country by loss of life, the scourge of crime and criminality, as a country we have endured coming down increasingly from September 2015 is unquantifiable and unbearable. And so we were listening and waiting. Budget 3, okay, you've been there 2 years, you've probably settled along. What are your plans? What are your initiatives to protect our citizens, to protect our children, to protect our property, to protect our businesses? And we waited with bated breath, all in vain. How was the government going to address the level of crime and criminality? What were the plans to support countless victims of crime who have lost loved ones? In this budget statement, the minister clearly demonstrated the importance that his government places on national security and safety and the need to protect our citizens. It was 2 hours into the presentation that the minister sought to reveal government's plans for national security, and that lasted all of about 6 minutes in over 3-hour budget presentation. 3 hours and 20 minutes. The national security presentation was, in my respectful view, insulting, insensitive, and uncaring to the most important issue bedeviling our country today. The statement of the minister, again, bankrupt of ideas and substance, lacking in plans. And so, after 2 years and 3 budgets now, the population now accepts a mistake that was made in September 2015. The country now understands that this government not only lacks competence and credibility, but they are uncaring and insensitive, and at times arrogant, with respect to the suffering of the people of this country. So, hard-working, honest citizens continue to be bait, continue to be terrorized with respect to safety and security by criminals. You know, the minister read his budget on Monday, and just maybe, 2 days after, I think the 3rd of September 2017, Madam Speaker, on Tuesday 3rd, which is the day after the budget was read, the United States Department of State, through the Overseas Security Advisory Council, that's what that would have been Tuesday of this week, directed Security Council assessed Port of Spain as being, and I quote, a critical threat location for crime directed at or affecting official government interest. This report, which is a signal to the world of the present crime situation facing our country, is a serious indictment on the government's fight against crime. Let me quote, Madam Speaker, a few comments made in the report as follows. The government of Trinidad and Tobago faces numerous challenges in its effort to reduce crime, including an overburdened legal system, bureaucratic resistance to change, unemployment in marginal areas, disenfranchised youth, negative influence of gangs, drugs, weapons, and an economic recession. TTPS crime stats show a 1.4% increase in all serious crimes as compared to 2015. Serious violent crime remains a major concern. Despite seizure of firearms in 2016, almost 81% of murders by firearms. According to TTPS stats, there were 462 murders in 2016, 420 murders in 15, 403 is 14, and you see the upward trajectory. The detection rate, 115.2 for 16, a slight increase from 13.6 in 2016. So the crime stats confirm, Madam Speaker, that crime is definitely on the rise, with this 1.4% increase in serious activity as compared to 2015. Despite the seizure of firearms, almost 81% of the murders committed by the firearms and so on. The additional, what is noteworthy about the report, however, Madam Speaker, is that specific mention is made of the success of crime-fighting initiatives that were implemented under the partnership administration. In this U.S. report, note is made of the additional vehicles that were provided to the protective services during the period of the partnership government. Note is made of the establishment in 2014 of the Community Comfort Patrol Program However, the report notes this program was discontinued in 2017 under this administration. It makes note of the program we had implemented of the Rapid Response Unit. The report notes that the RRU, Rapid Response Unit, has been operating with success in both islands. So these were things that we were doing in the fight against crime whilst we were in government. This report acknowledged the progress made under the partnership in the fight against crime and criminality. That today now, that success is no more under this administration. Where are we today? What do the numbers tell us? Now, the minister did not refer to one single success of his government in the fight against crime in the last 2 years. He could not give us a single statistic because that would have revealed the betrayal perpetrated on citizens. And Madam Speaker, allow me, using the Comstat data as follows. In the last 2 years, the government, last 2 years of this government, we have lost more than 1,000 of our men, women, children, sons, and daughters to criminal elements. Let me repeat that. In 2 years, more than 1,000 murders in this country. And Madam Speaker, the horror of young children staying with a babysitter being slaughtered and throat slit, the horror of the murders that are coming. Elderly women, elderly people. That's where we are at. I'm quoting, Madam Speaker, from the Commissioner of Police Comstat data, dated in 19 September 2017. For period January 1, 2017 to September 16, there were 343 murders. This is an increase of 13 more murders for the same period, and this does not include persons who are reported as missing, sometimes subsequently turn up dead. Woundings and shootings, 497 reports of wounding and shootings first 9 months of this year. This represents an increase of 107 more than the last year. With respect to kidnappings, increase of 36%, and kidnappings for ransom, there was an increase of 150%. Percentage-wise, numbers otherwise. Robberies, there have been 1,968 reports of robberies for 2017, and 577 reports of larceny of vehicles. That's up to September 2017. This means that each day there are 7 robberies reported, and these are the ones that are reported. There may be others that are not reported. There are 7 robberies reported each day in our country, and 2 vehicles are reported stolen each day in our country. Possession of firearms, 733 reports of possession of firearms and ammunition, 313 drug-related offenses. With respect to murders for the first 9 months of this year, there has been a 700% increase in murders on the sister isle in Tobago. In Tobago, 700% increase for the first 9. 25% increase in wounding and shootings. This is in Tobago. There has been a 20% increase in kidnappings, a 26% increase in robberies, a 38% increase in narcotic-related offences. This is how the government has delivered on its promise to keep the people of Tobago safe and secure. That is what those who may come for sandals, if it ever happens, will be exposed to in the sister isle. This constitutes the report card of this government in the fight against crime and its efforts to protect and secure the citizens of our country. This is what the people of this country have gotten in return for the $7 billion spent on national security during the last fiscal year. Let us not forget, previous fiscal year under this government, $10 billion. So we have spent in the 2 years $17 billion on national security, and not a single person in this country is safer today. Every single family living in fear, lost 1,000 lives and more. And the minister comes to tell us, they come to tell you, tell the country we could make it if we try. Perhaps the minister would have been better off, you know, if he had quoted from the other Stalin song. What is it, Bun Them? The other Stalin song. I'm sorry. Yeah, 1 second, I'm just looking for my note here. It's not here. The other Stalin song. Anyway, Bun Them. When you come by the gate, Peter is begging Peter to allow him to wait, to deal with those who are corrupt and all the other things. That's very strange. Yeah, okay. Okay. Ah, here it is. Let me quote some words from the famous mighty Stalin. mighty stallion. Judgment morning, I by the gate and I waiting, because I beg in the master, give me a work with Peter. It have sinners come in, with them. Madam, please. Because I beg in the master, give me a work with Peter. It have some sinners come in, with them I go be dealing, because the things that they do, I want to fix them personally. During my lifetime, they weren't kind, so much corruption that they make. Now it's time they must feel my weight. Peter, Peter, don't hold me back. This is my time for burning. Peter, keep the fire blazing. This is your time for burning. Keep the fire blazing. Burn them, burn them, burn them. That's what I feel more appropriate. There's another page, fellas. It says conclusion. I wish I could sing, madam, but I could never sing like the great Dr. Caliste. And so, all this is happening. Loss of loved ones, rape, rob, kidnap, brutalized, throat slit. I mean, a young boy trying to intervene to help someone gets his life snuffed out. This is a colossal and abject failure of this government to deal with crime. Correct. This is what it is. And so, having heard the Minister of Finance, I want to make it very clear. I fear that this coming year will be even worse than last year, and the figures seem to be supporting that upward trend. I led a government that saw serious crime fall, as I said, to lowest in 33 years, because we had a vision, we had a plan to make our country safe and secure. We provided the protective services with resources that they needed to fight crime. We were on our way to weeding out from the services those corrupt officers who were hindering the fight against crime. And Madam Speaker, with the help of God, we will do it again when we get back into office. The record of betrayal, deception, and broken promises. We must never forget, Madam Speaker, that this government promised the people of this country the solution to the crime problem. Madam Speaker, they said that they had the answer before the election and every budget, these 2 years. What we heard repeated. The 10-point crime plan, appoint a commissioner of police, still waiting. Manpower audit, still waiting. Municipal police, activate laws to establish municipal police in all local government bodies, and so on. Oh, we'll get 100 municipal police in every local government. Broken promise. No. Police complaints authority to amend legislation. Broken promise. Repeated time and time again. Parliamentary oversight to establish a JSC to deal with crime. Yes, it's true, the Parliamentary Committee has been established. When we met with the Honourable Prime Minister, we raised the issue of having the chairman as a government member. Prime Minister said that he would look into that. Nothing has changed. On the issue of witness tampering, in the 10-point crime plan, witness tampering offence, amend the present laws to create a specific offence of witness tampering. This was in your 10-point plan, your 10-point crime plan. This was in the 10-point crime plan of the then opposition, madam, before election. Not done, 2 years, not even a bill introduced, another broken promise. Unlawful eviction offence. The promise was to amend laws to create a specific offence of unlawful eviction. After 2 years, again, broken promise, madam. Urban renewal plan, the proposal has gone the same way as the creation of the offence of unlawful eviction and so on. This was one of the recommendations of the Dr. Selwyn Ryan's report to help with dispossessed youth and so on. Promised in the opposition 10-point crime plan, nothing. 10-point crime plan, accept the Caribbean Court of Justice as final court of appeal, nothing done, not even a consultation, another broken promise. So all this is the 10-point plan. And then the Honourable Minister comes to this House in the 2015-16 budget and makes promises, all of which are broken. One, establish a joint border protection agency. That has been repeated budget after budget, has not happened, broken promise. They promised the TTPS will be modernized, you'll have establishment of a police management agency. Again, after 2 years, another broken promise. Local government, local constabularies, as I said before, introduced in each. So that was a 10-point plan. It was in the 2015-16. Nothing has happened. Broken promise. They promised we will establish a police service inspectorate to deal with abuse of state power. After 2 years, another broken promise. They promised the prison management will be strengthened. After 2 years, broken promise. The promises of reform have not been kept, and the response of the President, prison officers to the 2017 package confirms this. So here we are, a sad story of broken promises, of inefficiency and incompetence in the fight against crime. Not a single one of the promises in the 2016-17 budget for the fight against crime, not one has been delivered. The minister's promises under the 16-17 budget were really, that's second budget, a repeat of the first budget. 3 promises were made. Then, establishment again, municipal constabulary, municipal police, third time promise made, broken. Decentralization of the police service, no step has been taken. Rollout of programs to foster the building of public trust. It is quite ironic that in seeking to build public trust in the police service, the Ministry of National Security shuts down the Community Comfort Patrol Program. You come back in this budget, Madam Speaker, and here now, just one basic promise, something called a National Crime Prevention Program. The question is, how, who, what, when, where, and why? And I trust as the budget debate is fleshed out, those words will tell a story of what was the latest plan of government to fight crime. Now this, it seems to me, is a mirror image of a program that is already in existence, known as the Citizen Security Program, established under the partnership, contributed to the reduction of crime and violence in over 100 high-risk communities throughout the country. So I await with bated breath what this will be, this new national prevention of crime. We move on, Madam Speaker. We have seen the promises repeated in the fight against crime. Today, I want to point out that we were able to bring the crime down, and because we did several things, you know. We did several things in that 5-year period, brought the crime down lower. The Rapid Response Unit, the Highway Patrol, the linking of the E99 to the NOC, Community Comfort Patrols, the National Security Operations Group, Counter-Terrorist Intelligence Units, all of these were in place, and much of it is being dismantled by the present government, and crime continues to rise. So, I know those on the other side have raised the issue of success of the SORT and of the OPVs, and I'm sure they will continue to say that this was the best thing since sliced bread. But I want to point out the following. When this SAUT SORT was in full swing, the homicide rate, the murder rate in our country was the highest in the nation's history. Serious crime was at its highest in our nation's history, and kidnapping was at its highest in our nation's history. Yes, we dismantled it, and yes, we shut it down, and we were able to bring down serious crimes, as I said before. So protection and safety is very important. I have met with the Prime Minister on at least 2 occasions, shared views of the opposition with respect to the fight against crime. We have made suggestions to grab the low-hanging fruit, such as operationalize DNA legislation, the electronic monitoring legislation, resource the Forensic Science Center, amend the anti-gang, specific scientific training of police officers, and so on. But today I just want to put some others into what has already been shared in the public domain in the fight against crime. And these are as follows. The forthwith take steps to establish a special unit to detect and prosecute corrupt officers in the protective services. Take steps immediately to repeal and replace the Justice Protection Act to provide a comprehensive, workable, and well-resourced witness protection program. Resource the judiciary, magistrate, and the office of the DPP. Fully resource the Forensic Science Center and take steps to establish a National Forensic Science Institute in collaboration with the UWI. Establish a National Center for Victims of Crime to provide services to cope with trauma and grief, protection, education, counseling, and to assist in any other way the victims of crime. Again, I call upon the government to reconsider its dismantling of the policies and programs which were in place when we were in office. To do with the committee comfort patrol. I remember things that we did. We expanded the fleet of the TTDF, Defense Force, the TTPS, and others by more than 500 vehicles, refurbished more than 11,000. We built and opened 8 police stations. We increased the number of CCTV cameras by more than 500 throughout the country. We established a National Security Training Academy, many other measures which allowed us to bring crime down. I move on as time moves on, Madam Speaker. I come to building human capital and quality of life, and I will not deal with all the heads contained in there under building human capacity in the budget statement. I just want to raise 2 of them. 2 of those. Here, right. On this critical level of economic growth, the government, it seems to me, more at sea than the ocean flower too. On entering office, they quickly and maliciously chose to fire the entire engine room of the HDC, and they brought in a new man. Madam Speaker, this has been a disaster. After criticizing us on every penny spent, on every action taken, every ceremony held, today, 2 years later, the housing sector has collapsed. They have not built one single house in 2 years. And by their incompetence, they have terminated work at several HDC estates. They announced with fanfare a new private sector partnership arrangement to stimulate home construction. 2 years later, not a single home built. The minister spends some time repeating himself on the issue of housing, and he had a most remarkable premise that there's a great demand for rental accommodation, and tells us that the government intends to focus on the area of rental. Madam Speaker, as elected MPs, for all of us here, I will tell you, 8 out of 10 persons, they want to buy a house, they want to own a home. We had believed very strongly in a home-owning democracy. In fact, rent money is called dead money, because when you rent for years, at the end of the day, you own nothing. And so I have to ask if this is the vision of the PNM, to keep citizens in bondage of renting, to have, in a way, create a new slavery by dependence on the state to change a light bulb in your rental unit. Under previous PNM governments, they gave out many rental units. When we entered office, we found that thousands of these renters could not and did not pay $100 rent per month. This is what the minister wants to take us back to. Measures announced by the finance minister will see housing developments turned into slums and quite possibly lead to more crimes. Madam, please. Thank you, madam. Yeah. This is the old model. We talk about a new paradigm, changing the paradigm, but we are going backwards into the old model of housing. The return to the old model of asking non-builders to build could also result in the disbandment of HDC, throwing about 1,400 public officers on the breadline. As a result, the dedicated employees of the ministry may join the other thousands outside there on the streets jobless. This government has effectively announced a reversal, as I said, of the home-owning democracy and development of communities which the partnership had established, and returning to rentals and infringement of current town and country planning regulations. The government is also abandoning their own public-private partnerships home building policy and is handing over the housing portfolio to individuals in the private sector. In other words, this government is moving from the 3P method to just P. From the 3 method, public-private partnership, to just P, that is, the contractor will have the millions of dollars to invest in home construction when dealing with a government they cannot trust. This, and I have pointed out earlier, Madam, the conflict of interest and the political interference that could arise from the proposal to do with housing in our country as disclosed in this budget. The government is in court today, in the courts, facing claims from contractors for failure to pay from way back then. Way back then. The Ministry of Housing, which has not built a single unit, is expected to become redundant and defunct under this system. The new measures are an obvious vote of no... Please, can you help me?
Speaker. 53,
Take a vote.
Might I invite the member for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West to take a walk and return?
Thank you, Madam. So here it is. The government wants to ask the same contractors to build houses, the ones who have them in court today, facing claims. They want to ask them to build houses on the promise that the government will pay at some point. The Ministry of Housing has not built a single unit, as I said before, and the new measures are an obvious vote of no confidence in the non-performing minister who has not built, as I say, one. This will be done completely outside the procurement laws and regulations. The focus on private developers to be registered by a new committee chaired by the Prime Minister reeks of political interference and corruption. Will this be a case of friends and family of friends building houses? Prior to 2010, they attempted to implement this exact model. They took political activists, gave them 5 houses to build, and these activists built 1.5. May I remind the national community that my administration had to spend $120 million to repair the houses and bad infrastructure left by the previous PNM regime. Who can forget the pictures of houses moving in Wellington Gardens, the hills collapsing and retrenched? Their legacy was Las Alturas. We are going back to those days under this government. It should be noted that the partnership executed 7,130 housing starts, delivered 8,521 housing units in the 5 years we were there. In 2 years, not one house has been built. 2010 to 15, records confirms 8,521 projects, units were delivered across 35 project sites. This figure includes the completion of store projects inherited from the previous PNM government. During 2010 to 2015, 102 homes were allocated to the differently abled, as we did a different kind of distribution. 800 homes went to members of the protective services. 380 long-standing applicants were allocated under the program known as Has Been a Long Time Coming, where they had been waiting for over 15 years. The housing policy now being articulated by this minister is a major retrograde step from that under the partnership administration, which delivered thousands of decent, affordable, and structurally sound homes and developed communities with access to green spaces and leisure areas. We built and were able to distribute homes in Oasis Greens in Chaguanas, Fairfield in Princeton, Cypress Hills in Union Hall. I personally assisted in turning the sod at housing sites and had the signal honor to return in my term for those same sites to give out keys to completed units. They have not built a single new house in 2 years. We gave out 100 homes per week. The regime is returning to this old formula of badly built units without community support and in breach of regulations. So we had another program to help people with respect to finding a home. And that program was known as the Land for Landless program. This government has completely turned its back on the cries of citizens for the provision of land. So while saying government cannot provide all the housing with the number of applications, they have turned their back on that other program, the land for the landless, which would have allowed persons to build their own homes at their own pace. Government always seems to believe that everyone wants a house, but there are many citizens, particularly the working poor and lower middle class, who would prefer a lot of land upon which to construct a modest, but only less, a home for themselves. Again, we talk about a home-owning democracy, a land-owning democracy, Madam Speaker, for which we stood for and the UNC stands for. Many young families yearn to purchase a lot of land. My institution designed through a rigorous technical and policy framework this Land for Landless program. This initiative would have distributed thousands of lots to deserving low-income applicants for land. Over 50,000 persons had applied in the 6 months for land. The LSA was to be the driver of this program. I am now told that this program has been abandoned. So what do we expect? You rent. You cannot become part of being an owner of a home and an owner of land. That is not a program contemplated by the government. And so we're talking about here under the heading, building, human capital and quality of life. Building human capital and quality of life. And I turn now to the Arima Hospital, because under this heading, we talk about hospitals. And I want to share with you, Madam, again, the distortion of the numbers presented here with respect to the Arima Hospital, and to ask which is the accurate number. We know for decades the people of Arima have been taken for granted and betrayed by various governments. Religiously, the PNM would promise to construct the Arima Hospital. Promises again broken. I recall long-standing protests by businessman Baliram Maharaj and others, often a one-man protest for this hospital. That was not taken on. As far back as 1981, the PNM was promising a hospital in Arima, 1981. And every time before and every time after, I have the footnote source here. Every time before, every time after, once elected, despite recognizing the need for this hospital, never built it. Madam Speaker, I am proud to say today that it was a partnership government that designed, tendered for evaluation and awarded and commenced construction of the Arima Hospital. Madam Speaker, when the Minister of Finance talks, we really have to listen, because often what he says and what the truth is are not related at all. There is a disconnect, a pasha for distorting the truth. When the Minister recites figures, double check them.
48.6, I do not have any such pasha. That is deliberate implication of improper motives.
Leader, I just ask you to withdraw that and rephrase it, please.
Okay, I withdraw pasha. It's a nice word, but I withdraw it. I'm saying, I'm withdrawing the word. Okay, I withdraw whatever it was, but I will repeat this. What the Minister says and what the truth is are not related.
Good.
When the Minister recites figures, I'm saying we must double check them, reality check. Under this heading of the Arima Hospital, we see some numbers that are totally not correct, as with so many other numbers given. Last Monday, the Minister gloated in this House, and I quote, "In keeping with the government's continued thrust to improve the availability of quality healthcare in Trinidad and Tobago, construction of the Arima Hospital is ongoing." The Minister says, and let's take note of the numbers now, Madam Speaker, I'm saying we must check them. The original projected cost of the hospital was 1.85 billion. But this PNM government, in an effort to save your tax dollars and achieve value for money, was able to reduce the cost to 1.6 billion. So, original cost 1.8 billion, Minister says, but they were able to reduce it to 1.6 billion, saving 250 million without changing the design of the hospital. The new 150-bed hospital is expected to be completed and be operational in 2019. This is on the Hansard of this House, Madam Speaker, from 2nd of this month, 2017. Madam Speaker, I refer you to the 2015 budget documents now, specifically the State Enterprise and Investment Program, page 52, 2015. It is reported. Construction of the Arima Hospital. This project involves the augmentation of the existing Armira Health Center to facilitate an inpatient capacity of 150 beds. The new hospital will have a maximum of 4 stories. The estimated cost is 1.680 billion, 1.680 billion, of which 600 million is projected for fiscal 2015. So, Madam Speaker, the original projected cost, this minister told us, was 1.85 billion. Totally incorrect, because in the estimates, the original cost is listed as being 1.680. So where did the minister get this 1.85 billion? In the State Enterprise and Investment Program now for 2016, so that was 15, it gave 1.85. In the 2016 State Enterprises Investment Program, one of those books there for 2016, I quote, construction of the Arima Hospital, 5-story, continues. The estimated cost of the project has been revised from 1.680 billion to 1.85 billion.
Whoa.
The projected expenditure for April to September 2015 is 132.6. So here we are, looking at the 2016 fiscal year. 2016 fiscal year would be September 2015 to just before August 2016. 1.8. So in our time, it was listed at 1.68. Under their budget documents, listed as 1.858. And that's what the minister mentioned on Monday. But this deception and confusion, this is deceptive, madam, and there's confusion. Mr. Noel Garcia, chairman of UDICOT, in an interview with the Trinidad Guardian published in February 2016, told this country that the cost of the Arima Hospital was $1.4 billion. Now, this is a person directly responsible for the construction, telling the country that the cost had effectively fallen to 1.4 billion. But the Minister of Finance comes to this House to say the new cost is 1.6 billion. And that there's a saving of 250. So the price went up in the last year, not down, Madam Speaker, from these documents. In June 2016, while touring the Arima Hospital, a proud Arima MP, Mr. Garcia, he announced that because of the economic downturn and the surveys, the hospital had been scaled down to 110 beds. And that's the cost. And that's where the cost was reduced to $1.2 billion. And these are quoted, I have the references here from the CNC3 TV and from the Trinidad Guardian. The Arima MP was never corrected, and therefore we trust that his information is the best information. After all, the Arima MP is said to be a very close tie to the chairman of UDICOT, Mr. Garcia, is in charge of the project. So how did the project, which dropped to 1.2 billion in June last year, go back up by 400 million now? Which minister is speaking the truth? Well, not the truth, is giving the correct numbers, madam. And this is important, because if the hospital has been downsized, and it means Mr. Imbud, the information given by Mr. Imbud to the Parliament would be inaccurate. If not, it means the Minister of Education would have said something else to the population, and the government, by failing to correct the information, circulated to the public. So here we are, all with different numbers, different quotations, and different size. Yeah, thank you. If the Arima MP is right, the number of beds have been reduced. It means construction costs per bed went from original cost of $11.2 when he announced it. It went to, 11.2 million to 12.3 million to 14.5 million. At present, a hike in construction costs under the PNM of 2.3 million per hospital bed in Arima. Madam Speaker, we ask for what are the true numbers with respect to this matter, and should we not get them, we will be filing relevant Freedom of Information applications. Madam Speaker, I turn now to Labour and Security, and I would want to, the World Economic Forum, I told you, I mentioned about the three core functions of a government. Protector, and I've dealt with the issue of national security, but the function of a government is also that of provider. And I look now at the issues dealing with labor and social security. But before I go there, I really want to spend a little moment on the fiscal measures. So this is at 146, yeah. Fiscal measures at 146. Because again here, there is something here that just is not making sense, Madam. 146. Excuse me. Okay. Fiscal and other measures. Madam Speaker, if you look at the Ernst & Young report on Budget 2016 and Budget 2015, we would see that the government failed to implement 16 of 31 measures, and that's in 2016, and in 2017 they failed to implement several of the measures as shown in Ernst & Young. The Minister announced several new taxes as fiscal measures in this budget, and let's look at the stats for this. With respect to the maxi-taxi fiscal measure, I think we have some concerns with respect to that, because you see, there has been a judgment of the High Court in Trinidad and Tobago, and I'm very familiar with that judgment because we were in government. Can you just see if any maxi-taxi, please, for me? Yeah. High Court action brought by the Maxi-Taxi Association against the government. Minister Jack Warner was the Minister of Works and Transport at the time, and Minister Warner put forward a directive to the Transport Commissioner that he will remove all the bans. You will not have to register for a ban to get a maxi-taxi, so anybody could buy a maxi-taxi. And basically that is exactly what has happened here, where the, thank you. Okay, thank you. Yeah, removal of the restrictions. This is exactly where the Minister told us, moving restrictions for banded maxi-taxis. But what was interesting is when you go to the budget document, budget statement, it is nowhere to be found in the budget statement, Madam Speaker. There is nothing about maxi-taxi removing restrictions in the budget statement. After the budget was read, and we downloaded the soft copy from the Ministry of Finance, the website, we saw one paragraph inserted under transport, last paragraph under the heading transport, which talk about a maxi-taxi restriction. And Madam Speaker, I then decided to get a copy of the Hansard because this was strange. I know I heard the Minister say it, but it was not in the budget document given to us. And what was said in the soft copy from the website gave a short paragraph. But I remember the Minister being very agitated or excited when he was talking about these maxi-taxi restrictions. So I went to the Hansard, and that was also different. This is what we saw on the online version. We are pleased to announce that we are moving all restrictions on banded maxi-taxis in order to open up the public transport system. That's the soft copy from the website. Did not exist at all in the printed budget documents, which gives me the impression that this was an afterthought, that when the budget documents were being printed, it wasn't there. It wasn't there at all. Came after, made a statement here, and inserted it. And to me, something is not right about that you give us a document here, you go up on the Parliament website, and you insert something, You insert something that was never in the document here, and then you go further. So the documents, that got me really concerned, madam. I said, what else? And we spent a lot of man hours taking the 3 documents to compare them, and there are other areas, and the MPs will raise them, where the things are different. It's a kind of sleight of hand, with due respect, of the amount of time now to see which is the correct one. We go to the Hansard. Let's see what the Hansard said. It's an extended part, this government, to remove current restrictions on allocation of taxi license. Remove it altogether. No longer will there be restrictions. Madam, please, this is becoming overbearing.
Notice, I am sure you would like to pay some interest in what is being said, and I would like you to assist me in hearing. Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, ma'am. Restrictions, removing restrictions. Remove it altogether. No longer will be restrictions on ownership of banded maxis. Persons will be able to buy and ban their maxi taxis, drive wherever they please without any restriction. This will open up the public transport system. So it appears that the minister, before walking into this chamber, or the night before coming to make budget presentation, the morning before reading here, or the night, someone probably spoke with him and said, hey, it's a great idea. Take off all these bans and so on. Because if the minister had checked it, his ministry officials would have told him that you cannot do that in law. This is exactly what happened to the same ministry with the previous minister. Therefore, no due diligence, no checking, no research. Vaps, Vikey Vi, you come and say, just take it off. I don't know who put it in your head. Whose idea it was. So, we are unsure about what restrictions are being removed. As the minister on one hand said, all restrictions will be removed. And then on the other hand, the minister spoke of the removal of restrictions on ownership of banded maxi taxis. I'm sure he will tell us what he means in due course when he responds. So they're 2 completely different statements. They carry completely different meanings. I don't know which version we should rely upon. After the statement was printed, the minister thought of removing the restrictions on banded maxis and then clandestinely included, as I said, in the online version. The minister thought one thing, wrote another thing, and said something else altogether. Further, had this been a policy that was contemplated by government, we'd have seen an adjustment to the draft estimates of revenue under the subhead, application of maxi taxi license. Madam Speaker, that should have been included in the estimates. There's no such estimate for this item. They formulate government policy on the hoof, it seems, Madam Speaker. This brings me to another important point. In 2011, as I started to relate before I located the text, an attempt was made to remove the restrictions on the registration of maxi taxis. It was shut down by the High Court in 2011, and that is in the case of Ian Hewitt and others versus the Minister of Works and Transport and the Transport Commissioner. The claimants were the Association of Maxi Taxis of Trinidad and Tobago Routes 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, Maxi Taxi Associations. They brought the action against the Minister of Works and so on. The court found that such a decision was unlawful as the Transport Commissioner failed to consult with the Advisory Committee and other stakeholders, such as the claimants, as required by the provision of the Maxi Taxi Act, before making its decision. It is another requirement that the consultation be conducted at a time when proposals are at a sufficiently formative stage. In this case, the decision is already made. There has been absolutely no consultation with respect to this matter. They have called on the minister to meet and speak with them. And they had several meetings with the then minister, but it did not save the lawfulness of the action in just removing the ban restrictions on the banded maxis. Now, it sounds like a good idea to move off these and say everybody go and buy. But what is going to happen given the cost of these? It is a small man who is going to get run off the road again. It's a small man. The super elite with the money could buy 10 maxis. But the small man with 1 maxi will not be able to effect the economies of scale that a person with 10. And therefore, when you come up to offer services, the man with the 5 or the 10, he can offer you a lower rate, thereby the other maxi taxes are going to be difficult. And that's why they challenged it in the court, because they were going to be suffering a severe disadvantage. Madam, in the last half hour I would like to spend a moment on the way forward as I see it. 20 minutes, sorry. 20 minutes. 23, thank you. On the way forward. It is clear in this budget that we have not seen any real indication of a shift in paradigm with respect to taking our country forward. 184, 14. We are taking the country forward. And therefore, I would like to spend a little time, as I said, sharing the road that we must travel to come out of the outdated paradigm of raising taxes, of borrowing and spending. That is simply not working. That has been going on for long enough. It is not working. The revenue streams are down, and especially now where energy revenue is also down. So we have to change the economic landscape of Trinidad and Tobago. That change, in my respectful view, must address not only contemporary revenue-generating measures, but it must address the area of job creation and opportunities for our young people. The way forward requires determination, but more important, action. And I remain fully committed to working to transform our country, the policies, the plans, and the projects which we had in government that were people-centered and that were working. The home-owning democracy, as I said, the shareholding democracy, those are some of the matters. We delivered on the ideas of change in all spheres of development, healthcare, education, national security, social development, and so on. The point is, we delivered a better quality of life for the people of Trinidad. And so, I respectfully disagree, Madam Speaker, when the Minister says that he is doing a good job because the people are not rioting yet, the people are not feeling it. I respectfully disagree. They are feeling it in their pockets, in their families, they're feeling it in their homes. It is as if two sets of hitmen are attacking our population, the bandits and the taxman. I've spoken of the ills confronting our country. We have pointed out how government is creating a debt trap. While we prepare the future for our young people, have we forgotten the elderly as we go along? It is clear for our survival at this time of high prices, increased taxes, low incentives, and no new ideas offered by the government, we must find a way to generate money for the country, create jobs, sustainable, and business so that everyone would have a fairly decent life. So what are the alternatives that we can pursue? The archaic days of tax, spend, borrow over. What can we pursue? There are three options, Madam Speaker. One option is to create new jobs within the existing economy. That, however, is not going to happen because there's been no improvement in the economy since government took power, and as though they are working in a vacuum, there's no cohesion in the few areas identified for further revenue. Another option is to diversify the present economy, and that has started to some extent, but not at the rate or the pace that we want to go. Diversification in this present economy will require it to be more efficient, highly productive, and profitable. New revenue sources must be created in terms of product innovations, new platforms for growth, or developing new products which the markets exist. I will leave to my colleagues, others, to develop some more on the diversification efforts. But today, I want to propose a third option. So one is to create jobs in the new economy, in this existing economy, create jobs and grow revenue. The second option I said was with the diversification thrust, but I do believe there is a third option. And it doesn't mean it's an either or. They could go along simultaneously as we seek to bring in more revenue, create more jobs, and therefore create a better quality of life. That third option is to completely revolutionize our economy as other countries in the developed world as well as in the developing world are presently doing. And what is this revolution of which I speak? Last year, in my budget presentation, I spoke a little of it. I made reference to what has been called the fourth industrial revolution, the digital age, as announced and proclaimed by the World Economic Forum in Davos in 2016. And so this is the option, this is the revolution I'm suggesting that we must now roll out. to bring growth and jobs to our country. As an instance of what can be achieved, let's see what's happening elsewhere. While we were sleeping here, the world is moving ahead with other measures. We are now in the era of telebanking, intranets, bitcoins, technology transfers, investments. And we too here in Trinidad and Tobago must become part of the Industrial Revolution in finance, in medicine, trade, and research and development. Let me give you an example of the impact of technology on the financial environment that Minister of Finance will perhaps look at. This has happened elsewhere. The cashless society, madam. In Australia, November 2016, Citibank gets rid of all cash at all of its banks, and Australia phases out the $100 bill. Belgium, you cannot buy anything above 3,000 euro in cash. India phased out 500,000 rupee notes in 2016. Singapore, many retailers have no cash policy. Korea plans to phase out cash by 2019. Sweden, only 20% of retail is done by cash. So what is happening? The digital age ushers in this era of high value, high efficiency, high productivity, with tremendous opportunities in entrepreneurship and, of course, jobs and so on. Many countries have already made the forward. Now, Madam Speaker, this cashless society works in two ways. Yes, with more efficiency and more transparency, but you know what? It will work very strongly to help to wipe out corruption in our country. Because you will be able to trace every dollar through this digital technology, every dollar that is spent or sent. Many countries, I'm saying, have made it forward. Some are in the process. Some are leapfrogging into the digital age, creating great benefit. 60 countries were ranked in 4 categories of Digital Evolution Index 2017, some of which share the same type of population and size like ours. Here are a few examples. Stalled out countries, US, Canada, Sweden, Denmark. Stand out countries, Singapore, New Zealand, Estonia, UAE. Breakout countries, Russia, China, Bangladesh, Kenya. Watch out countries, Egypt, Pakistan, Peru, Vietnam. Now, Estonia is a place similar to our population size. They have less natural resources. They are ranked at number 30 on that index, madam. Barbados, ranked at 72. Jamaica at 75. They are all ranked above Trinidad and Tobago, where in this index, we are 94 out of the 138 countries. In 2016, we were ranked at 89 in this index, but that means there's a slide. So there has been no push in this area, and the way forward is very clear. In informatics, Madam Speaker, in robotics, a lot more here. I'll give it to others to raise. Micro-work platforms and informatics in this digital age can bring us work, can bring us jobs, can bring us growth. InnoCentive, which will allow local and international businesses to put up their problems to look for answers. The IT, in order to be a producer of wealth, madam, requires an industrialized approach. And that is the option I think Trinidad and Tobago should pursue now as we move from the old paradigm into a new paradigm of the industrial revolution. That is why when we were in government, we took the unprecedented step of giving every child in school, secondary school, a laptop to prepare them for this revolutionary new world, the digital age that is indeed sweeping around the country. And with the digital revolution, madam, you can have digital economy with other sectors of the economy, whichever sector, agriculture, sport, in every sector of the economy, this digital revolution can take place to create new jobs, to create revenue streams, and therefore growth and prosperity. Madam Speaker, I want to thank you very much for the time that I've spoken here. And as I say, what? I thought you'd be very happy. Madam Speaker, as I close, I will share a story of betrayal. I will share a story with you of betrayal. You know, there was a couple about 7 years ago, about 7 years ago, you know, couple, getting along very, very well, looking after the children. They had enough money to buy food and books for the children and laptops for the children. They had their home, they were taking care of, TV, fridge, and so on. And about 5 years ago, along came some smart people. And they basically mama-guyed the spouse in that couple to leave home. And she left and she went. And 2 years later, now she's crying. Because first, fellow lost his job. He had no income, he had no money, lost his job. So what did he do? He decided, well, look, let me mortgage the house, mortgage the car. But then came the time where he couldn't use those borrowings anymore. He had to actually pay it. Went around begging friends, so look, lend me money. Reached a point where nobody wanted to lend him because it was maxed out, borrowed out. Then he started to dip into the piggy bank of the children. And when the spouse complained, he said, shut up, don't say anything. That was today, in this time. That is where we are today. Madam Speaker, I'm saying the days of that government are numbered. I want to assure the national that it is only a matter of days, weeks, or months, but not years, before, with the will of God, the UNC will return to government. They are already in the middle of the week. They have reached Wednesday in the political cycle. And as we all know, by the time Wednesday comes around, if you blink, it's Friday upon you. So the people must have faith that the days of the PNM Prime Minister Rowley's government are getting lesser with each breath you take. When we look and listen to the chorus of protesters outside these hallowed halls from all walks of life, we are convinced they are clinging to the ledge by their fingernails. They are as stable as jello, Madam Speaker. And so, there is so much more I can say. The MPs on our side will go into much more details in other sectors. Let me just say that this budget has traumatized many. This budget is a bankrupt, brutal, biased budget which really betrays the trust of the people. It embodies the PNM's defining hallmark, that of blatant incompetence, corruption, and mismanagement of the country and the economy. I can only say to the Honourable Minister of Finance to heed the cries of every single sector in Trinidad and Tobago, from the top to the bottom, from the bottom to the top, from businessman to fisherman, from the single mother to the high-end CEO. And can I say, it seems most inappropriate and done in bad faith that whilst we were engaging the casino industry in a joint select committee, did a whole year of work, it seems to me to be most inappropriate and in bad faith to come and drop these huge high taxes on these people. You may not realize the number of persons employed in that sector. Something similar like this happened in the past. When I was leader of the opposition, then we had to actually get someone from the industry to sit in the Senate. I was able to appoint such a person in the Senate to bring the views of those workers. There are thousands of them directly affected and indirectly affected, and the fear of job losses is exceedingly great. They have asked on their behalf that we plead with the government to meet in good faith with them to continue the discussions with respect to the gambling bill, the Joint Select Committee that this Parliament was engaged in before implementing any of these draconian new taxes that are here involved. And so, Minister, we need to revise some of these measures. I've seen some are basically definitely illegal. Others are distortions of the truth, but at the end of the day, everyone will not feel the adjustment. It will not be equal. You know, there's broad brushstrokes. Everyone must bear the burden of adjustment. But it doesn't work like that. Because a man who has $10 to his name, and he has to pay $5 in taxes, whether it be gas, oil, or whatever, gas, the other taxes there, diesel, property taxes, whatever they may, and the man who has $100 who has to pay the $5, what happens? Not going to feel it like the man with the $5. So don't fool yourselves. There is no way that everyone will bear the burden of adjustment in an equitable manner. It's not going to be like that. Because they have those who have will be less impacted than the have-nots. Those in the working class and the middle classes are going to be wiped out and will bring us into a situation that could lead to chaos and social unrest in our country. Because if you do not have the majority of your people in working positions to sustain themselves and their families, then you're going to result into chaos and social unrest, Madam Speaker. So it's like, there's an experiment when you talk about equity and what is equitable, where you say, okay, people get A's, people get B's, people get C's. But you decide, you see all of this competition to get an A and a B and a C. No, that's not a good thing. So you know what? Let's give everybody A's. Let's give everybody an A. And when you give everybody an A, fine. So everybody's happy. First year, those hard-working students who would get an A because they worked hard. And then now, everybody's getting the A, so what happens? They stop performing. They stop studying because what's the point of it? What is the point of it? It becomes a disincentive because, well, everybody's getting the A. The one who doesn't study, the one who doesn't work, the one who's not productive, everybody's getting this A. And so it's a false issue of equity and equality, Madam Speaker. A false issue and equality. A government has a duty, the third core responsibility, to provide for those, sorry.
Continue.
Thank you. One of the core responsibilities of a government is that of provider. And this is especially so when it comes to the most vulnerable. That is why the whole issue of the social safety net is there. You know, Madam Speaker, you've just spoken to the same three people. I just have a few minutes left.
Yeah, no respect.
No respect.
I would really want to invite San Fernando West and Diego Martin Northeast to take an early lunch. Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Leader of the Opposition.
Equity? Yes. Equity, that the adjustment will be borne equitably by everyone. And I said one of the functions of a government, I mentioned protector, provider, investor in people. In terms of provider, it is the duty of a government to provide for those most vulnerable, those most in need. Madam Speaker, today we read about children who are being dumped. I mean, the most heart-rending stories, people being dumped. And I want to suggest a program that is done in Africa and in other countries. It's called Door of Hope. This is where, instead of people dumping babies anywhere, in institutions, children's homes and so on, you have a receptacle placed in which someone can bring a baby and put the baby in that, and it sounds an alarm in the entire, yes, Madam seems to be aware of it. It sounds an alarm, makes a noise, so the people in the institution know, and they will go out and collect it. I think collect the baby, not the he or she. Now, this is not to say we are condoning promiscuity and unwanted child pregnancies and so on. The point is, as in reality, we have to save the child who save a life. So I want to recommend the Minister of Social Development the Door of Hope program. And please, can we ask you to please bring back the baby grant so that we can feed the babies of our nation. I thank you very much.
Honorable members, I think it's agreed that now is a convenient time for us to take the lunch break. We shall resume at 2:30.